Chapter 1007. As Helene Vivian thought about it, she lowered her head and fed the two little ones another mouthful of chicken steak. The family of four walked around for about an hour and a half before it was their turn to eat. The important task of ordering was handed over to Bailey Shangxia. In Beligaju's words, he was already so old that he should learn to do it himself. Helene Vivian was speechless. She once again felt that there was a problem with her family's education method. Bailey Shangxia didn't have any objections. He liked to spend money for his younger brother and mother, not to mention that he now had an income. His red eyes scanned the menu and finally landed on the staple food page. Handmade noodles. The waiter lowered his head and noted it down. Bailey Shangxia thought about it carefully for a while and said in a faint voice, "I want everything except this. Give me 2 bottles of wine." Hearing this, the waiter was stunned. He wanted everything except handmade noodles. The waiter decisively turned his head away, thinking that he really couldn't listen to the child's random order. He had to wait for the adults to make the decision. Just do as he says. Thank you. Helene Vivian was very polite when she smiled. The waiter was completely dumbfounded. Why was even the adults like this? Customer, perhaps you don't know, but our beef and mutton are all real ingredients. It's not the same as the one sold outside. Don't mention how full it is. 2 adults and 2 children really can't eat so much. Why don't you choose more carefully? The waiter spoke with a Beijing accent and was very good at service. Helene Vivian liked this kind of authentic old Beijing people the most. She thanked him again and said, "Master, I know you have a good heart, but don't worry, we have a big appetite." Hearing that there were so many customers, the waiter didn't say anything more. He just muttered in his heart that how could they possibly finish all the food? They ordered everything. There are 28 plates of meat alone, not to mention all kinds of meatballs, tofu, vegetables, and noodles. Helene Vivian and the others were sitting at a table that couldn't fit all the food, so they used 3 carts to put the ingredients. All the waiters didn't think that they could finish all the food. However, what they didn't expect was that, in just an hour, the 2 carts were empty. When the waiter went in to add soup to the copper pot, Helene Vivian and the others were eating from the 3rd cart. They ate in a rather refined manner, but the ingredients could go down in the blink of an eye. What kind of people were they? Could it be that he had not eaten for a long time after robbing a tomb in the mountains? But even so, it was still too cruel. A total of 28 plates of meat, gone just like that. Gone. What was even worse was that one of the beautiful women actually rubbed her stomach and said, "I don't think I'm full. Forget it. Let's have supper when we get home." The waiter was speechless. Where did this person come from? When paying the bill, the cashier's hand trembled. The list was too long. When she looked up at the family of 4 in front of her, she thought that she had made a mistake. But it wasn't. It was them. The cashier was a little dizzy as she paid the bill for the other party. She felt like the whole world was a fantasy. Were all children nowadays so good at eating? In fact, it was fortunate that Helene Vivian and the others were sitting in a private room. Otherwise, with so many plates of meat being served and empty plates being taken down, it would definitely attract a lot of people to watch. However, Helene Vivian really felt that she was not full. After returning to the villa, she felt that her stomach was empty. This time, she didn't cook at home, because just as she was about to go to the kitchen, Beligaju grabbed her hand. "What do you want to eat?" "I'll make it. Steak." Helene Vivian knew that the only dish that a certain highness knew how to cook now was steak. When they were in Kiki Shili, he had made it for her once. Unfortunately, she was weak at that time and couldn't eat it at all, so it was wasted. If she could eat it this time, it would be a happy occasion. Beligaju replied indifferently, "Okay." Wearing a black set of home clothes, he stood tall in the kitchen. His slender fingers took out olive oil and red wine. When he put the steak into the oil pot, there was an enticing, sizzling sound, and the whole room was filled with the fragrance of meat. The kitchen was open, and Helene Vivian could see such a beautiful scene from the high chair. Some men were really good to marry, such as a certain highness. Even frying steak looked like he was on the cover of a magazine. As if noticing Helene Vivian's gaze, Beligaju casually put one hand in his trouser pocket while waiting for the steak and hooked his other hand at her. Helene Vivian leaned over and was kissed. As expected, his breath was different from hers. The man's lips were always soft and cold, and they were filled with the intoxicating scent of mint and sandalwood. Hellion Vivian always wanted to take the initiative most of the time, but she was always suppressed by the man domineeringly. "Kiss me later. I'm still frying the steak." She made it sound as if she was very introverted. He was the one who kissed her first. Hellion Vivian knew that she was not as good as the man, so she didn't dwell on this issue. Seeing a small piece of steak being served, she opened her mouth and took a bite. Beligaju always had unprecedented patience when feeding Hellion Vivian. The two of them held a plate of steak and nestled on the sofa. They ate one bite after another, and the red wine beside them was full. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows was the night view of the entire capital. It was bustling like countless stars. In the past, when Hellion Vivian took back her mother's business, she had seen such a night scene. But at that time, she only felt desolate. But now it was different. It turned out that the saying was right. The scenery wasn't important. What was important was who was by your side to appreciate it. "We're done eating again." Beligaju hugged Hellion Vivian. His handsome face turned a little, and his eyes were looking at something else. "Are you still hungry?" Hellion Vivian felt for a moment, and then yawned. "I'm not hungry, but I want to sleep. Sleep after eating." Bailey Jia Ju looked at the person on the bed. She was always particularly quiet when she was sleeping. Her slender and fair wrist would always be resting on one side, and her long chestnut curly hair would fall to the side, giving people a kind of lingering beauty. It was not unreasonable that the Phoenix Dharma idol was the most beautiful Dharma idol in the Buddhist world. If her soul hadn't been taken away, Beligaju would think that she was pregnant again. But now, Beligaju intuitively felt that Hellion Vivian's reaction was related to her soul being taken away. Chapter 1008. What was strange was that nothing had changed about Hellion Vivian. Apart from being able to eat a little more, everything else was normal. Was he thinking too much? Bailey Jia Ju caressed Hellion Wei Wei's cheeks with his fingers and reached out to pull her into his embrace. Hellion Vivian seemed to have sensed his breath, so she tilted her head and buried her face in his chest. Bailey Jia Ju's gentleness was always hidden inadvertently. For example, right now, when Hellion Wei Wei moved, he seemed to be able to comfort her. He tilted his head and naturally kissed her black hair. Hellion Vivian moved again and hugged Beligaju's waist tightly. She was indeed very domineering in this aspect. She had to hold on tightly to what was hers. Beligaju chuckled softly. He always misunderstood a certain someone. Other than helplessness, he also doted on her. The two of them hugged each other, and their shadows were reflected on the floor-to-ceiling windows. The room was filled with stars, and it was beautiful and romantic. The fireworks in the sky reflected Beligaju's watery gaze, as if that moment was eternal. The next day, the gentle morning light shone through the curtains. There were white roses planted outside the villa, and the room was filled with a faint fragrance. As soon as Hellion Wei Wei opened her eyes, she habitually wanted to find water to drink. Her bare feet casually stepped on the wooden floor, reached for a bottle of cold water, and raised her head to drink. She wanted to go back to bed and continue sleeping. However, she didn't know if it was her imagination, but she felt that her hair was especially long today. Also, the bed seemed to have become bigger. When Hellion Vivian lay back down, she lowered her eyes and looked at her ankle-length hair. She tilted her head and thought for a moment. In the end, she felt that it wasn't a big deal, so she tilted her head and planned to continue sleeping with His Highness. After all, with His Highness's figure, it was very comfortable to sleep with him in her arms. However, her hand had just wrapped around him when Bailey Jiaju woke up. After his deep eyes saw her, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he pressed down on her hand. Because he had just woken up, his voice still carried a trace of hoarseness and gloominess. "Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "No." Hellion Vivian didn't understand why His Highness kept asking her this question yesterday. She raised her eyebrows. "What's wrong?" Beligaju looked at the figure in front of him and said in a faint voice, "Nothing. It's good that you're not feeling uncomfortable." Then let's continue to sleep. Hellion Vivian hugged him and was in a good mood. Let's stay in bed. With her eyes closed, Hellion Vivian's skin was milky white and her facial features were more tender. Her arms and legs were much smaller than before. Her face was also small, with a unique stubbornness. Her snow-white kisaya dragged on the ground like flowing water. Her soft black hair hung down beside her body, like a lotus flower blooming silently on the surface of the water at night. Beligaju remembered the first time he saw Phoenix on Mountain Tenya. At that time, she was also very quiet. She didn't speak or smile, like a little jade sculpture. That's right, the person in his arms had returned to her childhood appearance. Obviously, this was the result of her soul being taken away. Phoenix had returned to her embryonic form when she transformed into a human on Mountain Tenya. As long as she was given some time to read more Buddhist scriptures and drink a few bottles of divine water, it would be helpful for her growth. Beligaju had studied the matter of raising little Phoenix when he was in Tian Dao. At that time, he wanted to snatch Hellion Vivian from Buddhism and raise her himself, not to mention now. After knowing these reasons, His Highness was much calmer. When he took a second look at Hellion Vivian, the corners of his mouth lifted into a sinister smile. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Hellion Vivian lay in his arms, quietly opened her big eyes that were as clear as mercury. With her fluffy hair hanging down, she looked very dazed. Beligaju buried his face in her long hair and chuckled. "Nothing. I feel like something is wrong," Hellion Vivian said very seriously. Beligaju raised his eyebrows and asked casually, "Then what do you think is wrong? How would I know what you're laughing at?" Hellion Vivian felt that something was wrong the moment he opened his eyes. "Is there something on my face?" Beligaju held the person in his arms, and the corners of his mouth were still curled up, full of evil. "No. Do you still want to sleep? Or get up and eat something. Let's eat." Hellion Vivian sighed helplessly. "I can't sleep because of your laughter." Beligaju hummed in agreement and held Hellion Vivian up with a faint smile. He seemed to be unbelievably gentle. "What do you want to eat? Meat is not good. You can't digest it." Hellion Vivian was obviously confused by this arrangement. "I've always digested it well." That was before. After Beligaju put her on the chair, he bent down and kissed her forehead. He smiled. "Now you have to be more careful. Drink a cup of milk first." Hellion Wei Wei never refused food. When she saw Bailey Jia Ju put the milk on the wooden table, she didn't even think about it before she picked it up and took a sip. Halfway through the drink, she suddenly paused and looked at her hand. It was an illusion. Her hands had become smaller. Hellion Vivian stood up immediately and turned her head to look at the half-open dressing mirror. There was only one thought left in her mind. Damn, Sakyat is definitely playing with me. As Hellion Vivian herself, she hadn't seen herself as a child for a long time. After all, she was a person who didn't like to take photos. Now that she saw it, she just wanted to run a few laps downstairs and have some peace and quiet. What's going on? No wonder His Highness suddenly asked her to drink milk. Hellion Vivian turned around and looked at Beligaju. That person didn't seem to care, nor did he mind that little Phoenix was looking at him with hidden bitterness. He poured a cup of milk for Hellion Vivian. "Drink more milk and you'll grow faster." So this was what he was smiling at from the beginning. Hellion Vivian was depressed. She sat on a wooden chair and didn't say anything. She just held the milk and drank it. Beligaju found it very interesting. He couldn't help but hug her and raise her above his head. The smile on his face was unprecedentedly bright. "You're so cute." Hellion Vivian. She had never seen Beligaju like this before. Did he like her that much when she was small? Beligaju loved her so much that he couldn't put her down. Why? Hellion Vivian was right. Beligaju really liked her this way. After all, His Highness was very obsessed with Phoenix when she was young. He didn't have a chance to raise her in the past. Now that he finally had the chance, of course he would have this kind of reaction. But you don't have to carry her everywhere you go. Hellion Wei Wei helplessly supported her forehead, just like a little Buddhist monk. Chapter 1009. Beligaju let her sit on his lap while he opened a business magazine to read. He looked very handsome, but he had to kiss her hair from time to time. She was really not used to it. Moreover, if others saw her like this, they would laugh to death. She definitely couldn't let her son and that group of rough men know about this. That was the only thought left in the miserable Helene Vivian. She couldn't go to the car dealership during the day, nor could she stay in the villa for long. There were no classes at the kindergarten today, so the two little ones would definitely sleep in at home. She had to escape now. The only good place Helene Vivian could think of was the headquarters of the Ju-Wei group. There was a place to rest and a computer to play online games. As long as she was given a book or a movie, she could stay there for the whole morning without affecting Beligaju's work. Most importantly, no one would guess who she was there. "You want to go to my office so much? Do you want to check on me?" Beligaju glanced at Helene Vivian and asked calmly, "How do you want to introduce yourself?" In fact, the 11-year-old Helene Vivian was not really a child. However, because the embryonic form of Phoenix made people look 3 years younger than their actual age, and because Beligaju was too tall, Helene Vivian had to look up at him every time she spoke. "Just say that I'm your sister." "Oh." Beligaju smiled slowly. "Okay." Helene Vivian grabbed him. Her hand was still small. "Then let's go now. I'll get someone to prepare the car." Beligaju's voice was very casual, but the smile on his face did not match it. The villa area was not far from the headquarters. However, when the staff on the first floor saw their CEO, Ju, appear in the building at this time, all of them tensed up. Fortunately, the company had a dedicated elevator for the CEO. Otherwise, they would definitely go crazy if they stayed in the same elevator as CEO Ju. However, who was the girl beside CEO Ju? She was so pretty, especially that pair of eyes that were as clear and pure as a transparent spring. It was as if as long as one was looked at by that pair of eyes, even if she said that the sky was round and the earth was square, one would believe her. Moreover, the clothes she was wearing were also different from the rest. It was a bit like the kasaya that was specially made for the novice monks in ancient times. It was extremely white and clean. "Did you see that?" The person that CEO Ju brought along. "Of course I saw it. I took a closer look just now. That child is so beautiful. Why is her hair so long and beautiful? It almost reaches her ankles, right? That's not the point. The most important thing is the other party's identity. It's my younger sister." "How do you know?" "Because, when I entered the office with the excuse of delivering some documents, I happened to hear CEO Ju asking the child to call him Big Brother." Beligaju was indeed thinking of a way to make Helene Vivian call him brother, and in a very shameless way. If you want to play computer games, say those 2 words. "Helene Vivian, I'm not playing computer games anymore. I'm going to lie on the sofa and rest with my eyes closed." However, Beligaju was not satisfied with this person leaving his sight. He grabbed her back and pressed her on his lap. His smile was very beautiful, with a unique demonic charm, and his voice was very low. "Vivian, are you sure you want to persevere until noon? It's only 8:40 in the morning. There are still more than 3 hours until noon. Are you going to lie on the sofa in boredom for more than 3 hours?" In order to prove her backbone, Helene Vivian was determined not to speak. Beligaju reached out and rolled up the sleeves of her kasaya, which was too long, and then whispered in her ear, "Even if you really persevere until noon, I will use lunch to threaten you." Helene Vivian, isn't it just hunger? Haha, did he really think that she would give up everything for food? How naive. So, food can't threaten you. Helene Vivian snorted in her heart and said, "Of course. Then I can only take a picture of your current appearance and send it to my son and the others," Beligaju said slowly as he pretended to reach for his phone. When Helene Vivian heard this, she turned around abruptly and reached out to grab his wrist. After hesitating for a long time, her little face flushed red. Beligaju wasn't in a hurry and just waited for her with a smile. Helene Wei then clenched her teeth and called out the 2 words brother with a pause. The man, who had tasted what he wanted, chuckled softly as he held the phone. He kissed the top of Helene Vivian's head and said, "Good girl." Helene Vivian didn't care what book she was holding in her hand and bit in annoyance. This person is so bad. Of course, Beligaju wouldn't let little Phoenix, whom he had carefully raised, feel awkward for too long. His Highness had always been good at tricking people and then giving them a sweet date. Don't bite the book. You'll knock your teeth out. Beligaju reached out to block Hellion Vivian's little head and said, I'll get someone to bring you the notebook. Hellion Vivian nodded. She wanted to search for records about her in the Buddhist scriptures on the internet. She couldn't see Sakya right now, so she could only find out how to recover her strength through some written records. Although many of the records were fake and exaggerated, she could still extract some useful information by removing the branches and leaves. Beligaju looked sideways and pressed his fingertips on the phone on the desk, indifferently giving orders. When facing other people, he was far from being as approachable as when he was with Hellion Vivian. Even after being transmitted through the switchboard, his cold voice was even lower than a real person's. The secretary had been looking for a chance to listen in for a long time. Now that she received Beligaju's order, she took a MacBook Air and entered the CEO's office without hesitation. About 30 seconds later, she came out with a very serious expression. In the end, she couldn't help but scream in the group chat. He's too gentle. You haven't seen how CEO Ju is like. He's so gentle that it breaks people's hearts. When I came in, he was holding a cup of water and feeding someone. He even told the girl to drink slowly, otherwise she would choke. Do you believe that CEO Ju would say something like that? I don't believe it. I don't believe it +1. I don't believe it plus 10,086. Who's that girl? Upstairs, are you new? Why aren't you in formation? Didn't I just say that she's CEO Ju's sister? She's so cute. A little beauty in a kasaya with prayer beads in her hand. She's so cute. When did I have an aunt? Wait a minute, this reply doesn't seem right. Secretary Liu quickly clicked on one of the avatars in the WeChat group and was completely stunned when she saw it. Little CEO, when did he sneak into the group? Chapter 10:10. In the villa, Bailey Shangxia brought over a small stool for Qingchun to sit on. He was originally washing his little brother's hair seriously with the shower head. However, when he saw the news in the group, Bailey Shangxia couldn't help but pause. The corners of his mouth curled up into a mischievous smile. Little Qingchun could only feel the water on his head rushing to his ears. He looked at Bailey Shangxia with his big bright eyes and asked, Big brother? The water rushed into my ears. Bailey Shangxia immediately came back to his senses. He directly pulled a towel over and nervously wiped his face. Qingchun giggled. Okay, big brother, why were you in a daze just now? I was looking at the news in the group, Bailey Shangxia said as he glanced at his phone again. Qingchun clenched her little hands and looked over. What group? The company's group. There's always a lot of gossip about Bad Dad in there. Bailey Shangxia leaned over to let her see clearly. Qingchun swiped her little finger on the screen. She raised her big eyes and asked, You lurked in the group because of this? Of course, why else would I? Bailey Shangxia said reasonably. Dad, you have to be careful of him. Qingchun. Big brother, can you not be so bad? It was obvious that Bailey Shangxia's bad side had already formed. In order to slander a certain highness, he seriously pointed at the screen with his little finger and looked at Qingchun. This aunt who suddenly appeared must be fake. I'll take you to the company later to expose her. Okay. Qingchun had always followed her big brother wherever he went. Bailey Shangxia thought that this time, he would definitely surprise his father. In fact, he didn't expect that Beligaju had installed a tracking device on his little phone a long time ago to prevent him from tricking his father again. Thus, as soon as the two little ones set off, their whereabouts were discovered. Beligaju looked at the little red that lit up on his phone and raised his eyebrows slightly. He then changed the position in which he hugged Hellion Vivian. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. Instead, the corners of his lips curled up into an evil smile. Beligaju was very comfortable, but Hellion Vivian was very helpless. Her original office scene was she would lie on the sofa, eat potato chips, play games, and watch anime or movies. Then a certain highness would sit at the desk and work seriously. She could even turn her head from time to time to admire his highness' handsomeness when he was working. There was food to eat, anime to watch, and handsome men. That was the best thing in life. However, Hellion Vivian would never have guessed that there was none of that. because His Highness had calmly told her that if she moved around, it would affect his efficiency. If he didn't hold her, he wouldn't be in the mood to work. Thus, Hellion Vivian became His Highness's personal pillow today. Beligaju had always let Hellion Vivian sit on his lap, because she had become smaller. Even if he hugged Hellion Vivian, she wouldn't hinder him from doing business. However, it was obvious that His Highness wasn't very satisfied with this. Thus, he moved his thin lips and blew into Hellion Vivian's ear. Shang Xie and the others are here. I don't know why they aren't coming up. What Hellion Vivian was most afraid of now was, of course, being seen by her sons. Her entire body stiffened, and then she said very calmly, "Let's go. Let's go somewhere else." Of course, a certain someone wouldn't object. He even added, "If we go out now, it's very likely that we will meet them face to face in the hall. I tried just now, but Secretary Lu's phone couldn't be reached. That means Shang Xie and the others already know something and are waiting for us in the hall." Hellion Vivian also thought of this possibility and frowned. "So, let's not go to the hall." Beligaju stood up from the office chair and tidied his sleeves. His suit looked good. "There's a tree outside the second floor. Let's go there." "Okay." Hellion Vivian moved as soon as she said so. This time, the two of them didn't take the CEO's special elevator. Instead, they took a normal elevator and stopped on the second floor. The second floor belonged to the planning department. When they saw Beligaju, everyone in the department was stunned. The planning manager thought something was wrong and stood up stutteringly. "Ju, CEO Ju." Bailey Jiaju only gave him a "you continue to work" gesture and then strode to the front of the window. With a whoosh, he opened the window that had no protective net. His movement was not hindered at all, and was as handsome as moving clouds and flowing water. At first, the planning manager thought that CEO Ju was here to inspect their work. In the end, he felt that the air was not good, so he opened the window. After all, their CEO was very particular about cleanliness. Everything that could be seen must be white, except for himself, which was black. Therefore, the planning manager deliberately moved his nose to sniff. After confirming that there was no strange smell, he wanted to ask something. Who knew that Beligaju's next move would be to use one of his long legs to step on the window in a very cool manner. Then, using this as a support, he jumped out of the window like he was in a movie. This time, it wasn't just the planning manager. Even the employees who were still obsessed with Beligaju turned pale with fright. What was wrong with CEO Ju? Why did he jump off the building? Although this was only the second floor, he would break his leg if he jumped off. But in the next second, they realized how stupid their thinking was. Because when they looked down, it was clear that it was a perfect landing. Even the curve of Beligaju's shirt was crisp and clear. There was not a single flaw, and it only made people feel that it was handsome. After Bailey Jiaju landed, he adjusted his collar and turned around. With a smile on his face, he looked at Hellion Wei Wei, who was standing in front of the glass window. Hellion Vivian did not hesitate. With one hand on the window, she immediately jumped in Beligaju's direction. Hellion Vivian would not know what Beligaju was thinking at that moment. In fact, a long time ago, when Beligaju returned to Mountain Tinya again after becoming a god, Hellion Vivian was also like this. She was standing on the roof of the hall of great strength. At that time, she was only this small, wearing a pure white kasaya. She did not have such a stunning spiritual aura, and seemed to be hesitating whether to jump or not. Beligaju knew that day she was punished by the Venerable One to be confined to copy scriptures for some reason. However, Phoenix did not like to be confined since she was young, so she always thought of various ways to escape. At that time, Beligaju wanted to tell her to jump, and he would catch her from below. However, Hellion Vivian did not jump, because Sakyu appeared. Chapter 10:11. At that time, the true Buddha had yet to face the tribulation. Buddhism was fair in its rewards and punishments. Sakyamuni smiled as he looked at the little phoenix who was sitting on the roof and didn't know what to do. He raised his finger, and a golden lotus appeared to protect his body. Little Phoenix sat on the golden lotus and came down from the roof. She ran toward the true Buddha without thinking, as if she did not notice his existence at all. Everyone in the three realms knew. When Phoenix broke out of her shell in the fire of hell, it was Sakya who brought Phoenix to Buddhism by himself by shining the light of Buddha on Mount Bujo. In other words, the first person Phoenix saw was Sakya. Her feelings for Sakya were like a bird that just broke out of its shell. She would treat the first person she saw as her closest kin. Otherwise, Phoenix would not use the Phoenix scimitar to sweep away all obstacles for Buddhism in order to repay his kindness. As long as Sakya appeared, Phoenix's eyes would always fall on that person, even though Baligaju knew that this was not love. But at that time, he kept asking himself why those clear and bright eyes did not see him. Perhaps at that time, his inner demon was planted. He wanted to get this person crazily. However, he was very clear about her identity. At that time, he might not be able to get it. Just like what the King of Hell said, Baligaju was very thoughtful. He had been like this since he was a child. His noble indifference was not a pretense. But the calculation in his heart was also real. That was why he stayed in the upper three realms to wait for an opportunity. An opportunity to make her belong to him, both physically and mentally. Now, Hellion Vivian had returned to her childhood appearance and was truly reborn from hell, just like when she had just broken out of her shell. What was different was that this time, the first person she saw was himself. This was the fundamental reason why Baligaju liked to see Hellion Vivian become smaller. Now, this person fell from a high place and only had eyes for him. That feeling was indescribable. Baligaju just raised a bright smile that had never been seen before and reached out to catch her. Even his eyes had turned into a beautiful golden color. Hellion Vivian always felt that he was carrying her like he was carrying a pet. But because their time was limited, Hellion Vivian didn't struggle and let him carry her forward with large strides. Sure enough, Bailey Shanxia noticed something the moment there was movement. Originally, he thought that after dealing with Secretary Liu, he would wait for his father to come down. After all, he didn't believe that his father was a person who valued his work. This time, it was inconceivable that he would come to the company so early. It must be related to the legendary little monk. However, Bailey Shanxia did not expect that his father, who had always disdained climbing walls, would escape in such an undignified manner this time. Through the window, it did not match the aesthetics of demons at all. Therefore, when Bailey Shanxia walked out with his younger brother, he didn't have time to see anything. Hellion Vivian, who had avoided a disaster, finally breathed a sigh of relief. She lowered her head and looked up some information about herself. Then, she sat in the car and announced, "From today onwards, I will recite scriptures every day. I have to grow back quickly." The two-faced His Highness didn't tell her that she would recover faster with the holy water. His fingers stroked little Phoenix's ankle-length hair and said, "Then find a quieter place." "Okay." Hellion Vivian thought for a moment and said, "I am different from other Buddhas. I can also increase my Buddhist fate by redeeming the dead and redeeming evil spirits. During the day, I will recite scriptures. At night, you'll follow me to the car dealership. The business there has been empty for a long time. It's time to accept orders." Baligaju raised his eyebrows and said, "Accept orders?" "Yes, the car dealership will become an online convenience store at night," Hellion Wei Wei said as she logged into her Taobao account. She smiled and squinted her eyes. "My shop is very popular." It was indeed so. However, the shop that Hellion Vivian mentioned was very well hidden. Only people who needed it would find it. Of course, there were also people who didn't know the reason. When they came to the shop, they would even laugh and say, "What the hell?" Because this Taobao shop was very strange. There were two sections on the website. One was called Day, and the other was Night. In the day, the things that were bought were very normal, such as car parts and so on. But when one clicked on the page at night, many unusual things would appear. It turned out that this Taobao shop was also doing another business besides car parts. This kind of business was a service industry, so it was a little special. I don't know if you have heard of a saying that ghosts actually exist in the world, but the six paths are different. You and I are mortals, so we can't see them. If you had just moved to a new house and found that the light bulb of the circuit security was always on and off, and that the TV would be turned on for no reason at night. If you often have nightmares and feel like there's a stone on your body when you sleep, you can't even move your fingers when you want to open your eyes. If your family or friends suddenly have a high fever and talk nonsense, eat with their hands, drink without order, and can't find the cause of the illness in the hospital, then you're welcome to come to our shop at any time. The shop will send the most professional people to completely solve the root problem. Most people who didn't know, even if they accidentally opened this Taobao shop, very few people would believe it. They would just think that this Taobao shop was using to attract customers. After all, there are so many people who open shops online. Without some skills and special marketing, how could they keep customers? However, they didn't know that all of this was real. Helly and Vivian had also received many orders through the internet. At first, there were people who were too curious and wanted to play with Helly and Vivian first, but they were all stopped by Helly and Vivian with a sentence: flirt with the shop owner at night. Will you see ghosts at night? Basically, this kind of setting was an automatic reply. If they really had something to ask Helly and Vivian for, they would directly explain the matter when replying. If there was nothing, most of them would retreat in fear when they saw this. Of course, Helly and Wei Wei's charges were also different. She would judge how ferocious the ghost this time was based on the other party's description. She would charge more if the ghost was clingy, but if it was easy to deal with, she would charge less. Today, she needed to find a malicious ghost. It would be best if it was a malicious ghost that had killed many people and absorbed many evil ghosts. Even the ghost servants couldn't do anything to it. This was because the deeper the resentment, the more difficult it was to be taken in by the netherworld. If it didn't enter the netherworld, it wouldn't be able to reincarnate. If such a malicious ghost was expiated, it would be a great merit. Her fate with Buddha would also increase. Chapter 10:12. The car dealership was especially quiet at night because the rough men had all returned to their apartments. Helly and Wei Wei didn't have to worry about being seen by anyone. She moved a soft cushion and sat next to Bailey Jiaju. Her hands and legs were crossed as if she was meditating, her mouth silently muttering Buddhist scriptures. Baligaju, who had attended countless Buddhist feasts in Buddhism, naturally knew what she was doing. However, it turned out that little Phoenix did not like chanting Buddhist scriptures. After chanting for a while, she opened her eyes. When she turned her head and saw that Baligaju seemed to be asleep, she ran back to the bedroom and ran over with a big blanket. She carefully covered Baligaju with it. She did not expect that the man was not asleep. He pressed her into his arms forcefully and ran his fingers through her hair. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "Sneak up on me. Boss, I'm only 11 years old. How can I sneak up on you?" Helly and Vivian used her head to hit Baligaju's chest. Baligaju chuckled and pressed down on the furry head. "It's not a sneak attack? Then go to sleep. Leave those Buddhist scriptures for tomorrow." "No, we have to do business today." Helly and Vivian supported Baligaju with her small hands. Her small face puffed up slightly as she muttered, "I remember that when I was in Mountain Tenya, I could grow taller by chanting Buddhist scriptures for a period of time. Why is it useless in the human world?" Baligaju listened to little Phoenix's words, and his smile deepened. "You're just chanting Buddhist scriptures and not copying them. Of course, the effect is not as good as when you're in Buddhism." "Is that the reason?" Helly and Vivian was a little doubtful. Baligaju's expression did not change as he asked in return, "What else could it be?" "I don't know. I've forgotten how I grew up." Helly and Vivian was indeed a child at that time. She was considered well-behaved. Other than not liking to be locked up, she followed Buddhism's teachings. However, when she grew up, she would fight with others from time to time. She was not very clear about the process of her growth. In her impression, she was the same as other little acolytes. However, when she thought about it carefully, it was different. She did not need to shave her hair. In the beginning, little Phoenix thought that she was too individual and wanted to cut her hair. However, Sakya said that she did not need to cut her hair because a phoenix could not be without feathers. Helly and Vivian was confused and tried to recall the past. "I can't remember. Is that I've become stupid?" to the present. No. Beligaju gently rubbed her cheeks with his fingers. He seemed to like listening to her talk about how she had forgotten about her growth. He smiled beautifully with his extremely handsome face. At that time, you had just broken out of your shell from hell. Of course, there are many things that you can't remember clearly. Hellion Vivian looked at him. She seemed to have more facial expressions after she became smaller, but I clearly remember that you always ignored me when I threw buns at you. You even had a cold look on your face. What else? What else do you remember about me? Bailey Jiaju's deep voice was full of coaxing. Hellion Vivian was not fooled. She quickly realized that it was too intimate for her to sit on his body in such a position. Although her body had not fully developed, Beligaju was different. He was hot all over. I don't remember. Where's the pen and paper that you gave me before? I want to copy the Buddhist scriptures. Now, Beligaju frowned. He didn't remember that she was so diligent. Hellion Vivian nodded. Now, it has to grow back quickly. Are you so afraid that others will see you? Beligaju hugged her from behind and laughed in her long hair again. Hellion Vivian glanced back at him lightly. That's just one of the reasons. The most important reason is that I can't sleep with you in my current state. Beligaju was stunned. Then, he couldn't stop the laughter from overflowing from his throat. Hellion Vivian was a little confused by his laughter. She said it very seriously. You're right. You can't sleep with me in your current state. Beligaju put her down. He still liked the feeling of being completely dependent on her, so he didn't want to take care of her for a few more days. The hesitation was only for a moment. Soon, Beligaju held Hellion Vivian in his arms again and looked at the screen of the computer from behind her. There's a business. Hellion Vivian saw that Tabaugh was flashing. She was in a good mood and clicked on the page. The person on the other end of the dialog box sent over a trembling message. Can you really catch ghosts? She seems to be following me all the time and won't let me go at all. I'm really going crazy because this ghost is not like me anymore. You know, I was very obedient and never thought of developing a relationship with anyone. But one day, when I woke up, I found myself lying next to a man. The man was very old. He hugged me and said a lot of things. He said something about how cute I was last night, but I remember that I fell asleep after entering the dormitory and didn't go anywhere. Why is it like this? Why did I become like this? Hellion Vivian typed quickly and went straight to the point. Where are you? Send me your address and contact information. I need to meet you. It's best to meet you at night. Soon, the other party sent an address. It was a restaurant near Wadeaku. This address was not out of Hellion Wei's expectations, as most of the universities in the capital were located here. After confirming the good news, Hellion Wei closed the notebook. She originally wanted to put on her own shoes, but she didn't expect Bailey Jiaju to put her down on the sofa. Then he supported her body with one knee, tilted his handsome face, and lifted her white bare feet. His movements were very gentle. Not only that, after helping her put on her shoes, he even took her hand and kissed it. He said, My beautiful master, are you satisfied with my service? Hellion Vivian blushed and threw herself into the man's arms. She said in a muffled voice, Let's go. Don't use the handsome man trick. We can't sleep. Yes, master. Beligaju smiled wickedly and kissed her small ear. He looked at her trembling body with satisfaction and then carried her out of the door. It was already dark outside. Beligaju didn't need to hide anything. Black feathers fluttered down, and he flew over the roof with Hellion Vivian. The demon's figure was more perfect at night, especially when they spread their black wings and landed under the moon. It was like a god had descended. Of course, this scene wouldn't be seen by anyone. The city was still bustling, especially at Wadeaku after night fell. There were many Koreans in this place. You could hear phrases like Aadaukai after taking 2 steps. Chapter 10:13. Even the girl who had approached Hellion Vivian had invited her to a Korean restaurant called Myeongdong. When she walked in, the lights were very dim. It was obviously a very popular place. Logically speaking, such a phenomenon shouldn't have happened. However, it was precisely because of this phenomenon that Hellion Wei smiled. She did not make the call. Her clear eyes swept across the dining hall and fixed her gaze on a girl with waist-length hair. Hellion Wei Wei also didn't hesitate. Even if she became smaller, the innate queen's aura on her body didn't diminish in the slightest. Although she looked very cute now, this didn't hinder her sensitivity. Miss Towsey, Hellion Vivian, sat directly opposite the girl. The girl seemed to be afraid of something. When she was suddenly called, she raised her head and looked at Beligaju, who was sitting beside Hellion Vivian. Hellion Vivian knew that it was difficult not to notice His Highness' face, so she casually made up an identity for him. "This is my assistant. Now, Miss Towsey, please tell me more about you." "Your assistant?" Towsey looked at Hellion Vivian hesitantly. "You're the owner?" Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and smiled. "Miss Towsey, don't worry. Although I'm small, I'm not bad. Otherwise, I wouldn't have sat directly opposite you without even making a call." After Hellion Vivian's reminder, Towsey realized this key point. Her eyes widened. "You? How did you know it was me?" "It's very simple." Hellion Vivian took a deep breath. "You have the smell of a ghost on you." Towsey shuddered at Hellion Vivian's words. "She's still here? Then, can you send her away?" "I'm really too scared. Too scared." "She's not here." Hellion Vivian glanced at her again. "Which school are you from?" "I suspect she's in your school." Towsey's expression changed. School? That's right." Hellion Wei Wei's eyes looked at her. "Moreover, if we don't drive her away, you will completely lose your own consciousness in less than 3 days, and this body of yours will no longer belong to you. It's very simple. This is the legendary possession. Since you're a university student, you should be able to understand what I mean." Towsey's lips trembled. She wants to turn me into her?" Something like that. Hellion Vivian knew that Miss Towsey was very against her going to her school, so Hellion Vivian didn't say anything to make her feel better like other people. Instead, she told her the truth. The person called Towsey seemed to have no other choice. She stood up with one hand on her forehead and said, "Well, I'll take you to the school to have a look." It was said that the school was a magical place. During the day, it was bustling, and it seemed that no place could be as noisy as here. At night, it was very quiet, and even the sound of footsteps echoed behind. However, when Hellion Vivian and the others arrived at the school, it wasn't too late, so the lights were still on. Occasionally, 1 or 2 students would pass by on bicycles, and young couples would come out for a walk. Overall, this school didn't seem to have any problems. However, that vague resentment seemed to be lingering in every corner of the school. Hellion Vivian had just taken a few steps when Beligaju picked her up and placed her on his left shoulder. If it was someone else who did this, it would definitely look very strange. However, Beligaju's height was there, and he was very handsome. When he held Hellion Vivian with one hand, his windbreaker fluttered slightly, and he was extremely handsome. Hellion Vivian was surrounded again, but fortunately, she was used to it. She pressed her small hand on the man's shoulder and carefully observed the surrounding buildings. In fact, if it wasn't to make his little phoenix happy, Beligaju wouldn't have agreed to let her come here to catch ghosts. Those stupid and dirty things. How could they touch her scent? Hellion Vivian also noticed the way a certain someone raised her. It seemed to be summed up in one word, and that was a tyrant's pet. When she tilted her head, he would ask her if she was thirsty. If her shoelaces were untied, he would personally lower his head to help her tie them. Before coming, he even reminded her that it was okay to play, but she couldn't use her real strength. If he saw that she was too tired, he didn't mind taking care of this malicious spirit himself. If a certain highness personally took care of it, not to mention a malicious spirit, even a demon would be beaten to pieces by him. If that was the case, how could she complete her plan of growing up? Beligaju raised Hellion Vivian very carefully. He didn't even let her touch cold water. Today, a certain highness personally washed Hellion Vivian's hair for her, including putting on her shoes. Towsey looked at the two of them from the side. After hesitating for a long time, she said to Beligaju, "The two of you seem to be very close." Beligaju didn't say anything. He only curled his lips, which was devilish and charming. Towsey was stunned. Hellion Vivian turned her head and pointed at the teaching building not far away. Did someone die in that place? In an instant, Towsey's expression changed. Hellion Wei didn't wait for her to speak and laughed. It seems like she really did die. Just now. I used my phone to search for your school while I was walking. The webpage didn't show any students in your school who had jumped off a building. Then the question is, who died? Do you know? I'm not sure. Could it be that someone blocked the news? Towsy said in a low voice. There are some things that I can't say too clearly. You should know that the school will take some measures in this regard. Otherwise, if the news is leaked to the media, the school will also be affected. Hellion Vivian put away her phone. You're right, but I thought you would know. After all, the person who died was your professor's wife. As soon as Hellion Vivian said that, Towsy trembled. Then, she asked in fear, Are you saying that the person who looked for me was her? What do you think? Hellion Vivian didn't answer, but asked instead. Towsy's expression didn't show anything. She only looked at Hellion Vivian with tears in her eyes. You have to save me. You have to help me deal with her. Of course. Hellion Vivian answered very professionally. Our Taobao shop has always been honest, but there is one thing that you seem to have mistaken. Catching ghosts is catching ghosts, and helping people is helping people. I'm only responsible for catching ghosts when I accept your business. Towsy didn't quite understand Hellion Vivian's words, but as long as she caught that woman, she should be safe. Let's go. Hellion Vivian glanced at the moon not far away. Go to the place with the strongest Inchi and wait for her to appear. Towsy was scared. Do I have to go? If you don't go, she will directly possess you at 12 o'clock. Hellion Vivian's voice was very faint. Towsy covered her face as if she was crying. Why do these ghosts still harm people after death? Chapter 10:14. Because there's resentment. Hellion Vivian turned around and glanced at her. As long as the resentment is strong enough, even if you don't devour evil spirits, you can still use the price of your reincarnation to exchange for a chance to take revenge in the underworld. Don't you know this? Towsy shook her head, and her expression became more and more unsightly. This was the first time she had heard of such a thing in the underworld. Hellion Vivian smiled faintly. It's understandable that you don't know. After all, there aren't many evil spirits that are so persistent. With that, Hellion Vivian turned her face and said directly to Beligaju, You lead the way? For a demon, it was a piece of cake to find the place with the strongest Een energy, not to mention that this demon was Beligaju. It turned out that there was an abandoned laboratory in the school. No supernatural incidents had occurred in this laboratory, but because it had not been used for a long time, few people went there. It was very dark everywhere. Even if there was a light, it would be on and off. When Hellion Vivian and the others walked in, there was no one around. Occasionally, a counselor would pass by, but he would only look at them suspiciously and did not stop them. The corridor of the laboratory was paved with tiles, which had an old-fashioned feel from the 1980s. Nowadays, in many places, only some elementary schools would use such tiles. Any higher education institution would have a clean and shiny floor, unlike this laboratory building. The paint on the walls had almost fallen off. There were no aluminum doors, only the most primitive dark wooden doors. The iron locks hanging on them were even rusted. It seemed that there was a reason why no one was allowed to enter this place. Generally, this kind of building, even if there were no dirty things, would accumulate a lot of Een energy. In addition, no one knew if there would be any unexpected situations, such as loose screws or power outages. Once a student entered, their safety could not be guaranteed. However, before Hellion Vivian came in, she also took a picture of it and sent it to Monkey. She asked Monkey to investigate. Although the Een energy in this laboratory building was very strong, it had always been considered peaceful. No unusual things had happened. Of course, there were also students who had fallen and injured themselves in the vicinity, but such trivial matters were not included in the calculation. Under normal circumstances, if a person walked alone in a place where Een Chi was abundant, they would always be unlucky. Perhaps it was because it had not been used for a long time, but the entire laboratory building was filled with a moldy smell. Hellion Vivian purposely lowered her head to look at the corners of the corridor. Some places had already grown green moss. The more moss there was in a place, the the more energy there was. Towsy was so scared that she wanted to grab Beligaju's sleeve with her fingers. But every time, the man would coincidentally avoid her. Towsy had no choice but to look around, fearing that something unknown would appear behind or on both sides of her. Don't look around, Hellion Vivian reminded her again. Look in front of you. Since you were able to search for my shop on the internet, you should have done some research in this area. When a person walks at night, there are 3 young flames on his body, one on his left, one on his right, and one on his back. Every time you look, one of the young flames will be extinguished. When all 3 flames are extinguished, the evil spirit will appear. Of course, Towsy understood this. She did not know what the corridor looked like in Hellion Vivian's eyes, but in her eyes, the light in front of her was blurred. She kept feeling that there was a shadow there, but when she looked carefully, there was nothing. She did not know who had hung a shirt outside. When the wind blew, it looked like someone was jumping down from the 2nd floor. Towsy's heart skipped a beat. Her palms and back were covered in sweat. She did not dare to look anymore. She closed her eyes tightly and quickly followed Hellion Vivian's footsteps. Before they got too close to the toilet, the smell that hit them made Beligaju frown. Hellion Vivian knew that he was a clean freak, so she did not waste time. She flicked her kasaya and chanted the Buddha scriptures. In just a moment, all the messy things hidden on the 1st floor revealed themselves. Towsy looked at the black hair that was crawling over to her feet and screamed. She wanted to run, but Hellion Vivian pulled her back. Didn't I tell you before you came in? Don't leave my sight. Hellion Vivian looked at her indifferently, but she put more strength in her hands. Towsy realized with a lingering fear that the figures that appeared did not come toward them. Instead, they stood in front of them. Some of them were in the corner, and some were in the middle of the corridor. Their faces were livid, and there was no trace of expression. They were like puppets with strings pulled, floating back and forth. Their bodies were wet, as if they had just been fished out of the water. Why? Why are there so many of them? Towsy grabbed Hellion Vivian's arm. Since the man did not allow her to grab, she could only grab the female shop owner. Hellion Vivian glanced at her, because a person's resentment affected them, causing the people who were supposed to be reincarnated to become bound spirits. Towsy seemed to have some understanding of this. When she heard the words bound spirits, her thin lips turned white. Is it that serious? Don't underestimate a woman, whether she is alive or dead. After Hellion Vivian finished speaking, she looked at the bound spirits and asked in a calm voice, "Where is she?" The bound spirits did not have the ability to speak. The reason why they were bound was because they had not seen the messengers of hell. Therefore, many people did not know that they were already dead. Their thoughts were stuck on why they could not walk out of this laboratory building. Sometimes, people would hear strange noises coming from upstairs. That was because some ghosts who had not reached the 7th day were wandering around. After these bound spirits died, they were attracted to the laboratory building by the resentment and became a part of the building. Unless they could find the ghost that created the resentment, they wouldn't be able to leave this place even if they tried to find the ghost that created the resentment. After hearing Hellion Vivian's words, the bound spirits, who seemed to have slow reactions, slowly looked in the same direction. It was the 2nd floor. That ghost was on the 2nd floor. Hellion Vivian quickly understood their meaning. She lowered her voice. "Let's go up." "Still want to go up?" Towsy trembled. Her legs were weak. Why don't we go back and come back at dawn?" Chapter 10:15. Hellion Vivian said unhurriedly, "Ghosts also have a schedule. They're sleeping at dawn. Where can I find them?" But if we go up, it will be difficult for us to come down." Towsy really hoped that Hellion Vivian would give up on the idea of going up. After all, it was land below. If anything happened, they could just run out. But if they went upstairs, where could they run to? Upon hearing this, Hellion Wei stopped. "I charge based on the night. Every time you appear on stage, you will have to pay an additional fee. Of course, you can also choose to stop the process this time. However, you will face 2 outcomes. One is that the evil spirit will appear on your body again at 12 o'clock, which is 1.5 hours later. The second is that I will appear on stage again tomorrow, and the fee will be doubled. I think you will care more about the first outcome." Towsy really did care about the first result. She couldn't go on like this. She couldn't bear it even for one day. When she woke up in the morning, she didn't know what she did last night, nor where she went. She didn't even know who she saw. Don't stop the process. Let's go up. Towsy clenched her fists and finally made a decision. Hellion, Vivian, and Beligaju still walked forward, but Towsy was scared, so she suggested in a hoarse voice, "Can I walk in between the two of you? Shop owner, don't you know how to exorcise ghosts? You shouldn't be afraid of these dirty things. Can you let your assistant walk behind me?" Beligaju raised his eyebrows, and an extremely cold light appeared in his deep eyes. Towsy didn't know that that gaze was even scarier than any evil spirit here. The demon's displeasure was always elegant and bone-chilling. Hellion Vivian glanced at Beligaju. "You go to the back. Customers come first." "Yes, my beautiful master." His Highness seemed to be addicted to this game. He gently bit Hellion Vivian's ear, put her on the ground, and walked to the back of the line. With Beligaju at the back, Towsy felt much safer. With Hellion Vivian leading the way, she would be in the least danger if something went wrong. Because the entire laboratory building was too quiet, the sound of footsteps was particularly loud. The second floor was indeed darker than the first floor, but it was not as humid. Just as Towsy relaxed, she heard Hellion Vivian's voice again. "Miss Towsy, you really don't know this evil spirit?" Towsy's eyes flickered. "I've seen him, but I haven't spoken to him. After all, he's not our professor. He's just a family member." "A family member of the professor?" Hellion Vivian chuckled. "I don't like lies." Towsy was a little angry when she heard this. "Shop owner, you're here to catch ghosts, not to pry into other people's privacy. Any ghost has a reason to find a human." Hellion Vivian looked up at her. "Do you understand? She wouldn't appear here for no reason. She even gave up her chance of reincarnation just to possess you. Besides, you've known her from the beginning, haven't you? Otherwise, you wouldn't have used the word her when we first talked." Towsy's fingers froze. "Yes, I know her, but I don't understand why she keeps pestering me. I didn't kill her. Why does she keep pestering you?" Hellion Wei glanced at Towsy. The Buddhist prayer beads that were entwined around her body moved, emitting a faint light of Buddha. "Because you already have a ghost pact on you, which means that you have made a pact with her. When you made the pact, you probably didn't know that the other party was her. However, in the two realms of yin and yang, as long as one party makes a wish and the other agrees, it means that the pact has been fulfilled." Towsy was confused. "What contract? I've never done anything like that. I don't even have a pin's spirit." Towsy suddenly paused. "I did make a wish, but I didn't do anything at that time. When I passed by the teaching building, I saw a senior who was 1 year older than me. So, you wanted to get your senior's attention. To put it bluntly, you wanted to have him." Hellion Wei's voice was very indifferent. "That boy should be very outstanding in your school and should already have a girlfriend. However, you were unwilling to accept it. You always felt that the other girl was not worthy of him at all, so you made a wish. After that, you did get that boy, but when night came, you started to not be yourself anymore. Even that boy is starting to suspect you now. Isn't that right?" Towsy's eyes shook. "You, how did you know?" "I can see it from your personality and eyes." Hellion Vivian chuckled. "As for the rest, it's related to what you've done before. For example, why are you so afraid of this female ghost?" Towsy grabbed her long hair. Her pale face looked gentle and pure. "She wants me to die, and she wants to replace me. Since you can guess so many things, why don't you take her in immediately?" "I'll take her in." Hellion Vivian smiled again. "Since you don't want to say it, let her tell me in person." As soon as she finished speaking, Hellion Wei's Kasaya moved and a figure gradually appeared behind Towsy. After seeing the figure, Towsy was so scared that she fell to the ground. Her fingers trembled as she kept moving backward. The figure was about 50 years old. If Hellion Vivian's mother was still alive, she would be about the same age. She looked at Towsy with a vicious gaze, as if she was looking at garbage. Her body was emitting a black aura. Her face, which was no longer young, looked extremely gloomy. Her lips moved up and down like a black hole, and the sound she made was very eerie. That was nonsense, and people in the human world couldn't understand it. Hellion Vivian waved her Kasaya again, and the words in the figure's mouth changed. I'm so blind to be so nice to you. It's not easy for a girl like you to go to school in another place. I made soup for you when you were sick, and I even asked Old Tan to take care of you more. But how did you treat me, your master's wife? Not only did you climb into Old Tan's bed, but when you did that kind of thing, you even deliberately called me and asked me to listen to you. To listen to you. At this point, the figure couldn't continue. Her eyes turned cold, and there was a heaven-defying hatred. Fortunately, God has eyes, and let me hear you making a wish. You want to steal someone else's man, so we'll fulfill your wish. Don't you like to sleep with people older than you? Then I'll let you sleep with me every day. Chapter 10:16. As the last sentence of the figure faded away, a voice rang out. The entire second floor of the laboratory building was filled with thick black fog. That was because the resentment was too deep and accumulated into hatred. Tauzi's eyes were about to fall out of their sockets because of fear. She turned and ran toward the stairs. Her legs were so weak that she didn't dare to look back. But no matter how she ran, she couldn't reach the first floor. When she stopped, she looked up and returned to the original place. The two words second floor were dyed red with blood. Tauzi was so scared that she completely collapsed. She looked at Hellion Vivian and shouted, I've paid for it. Hurry up and take her away. Hellion Vivian heard this and raised her eyebrows. She blocked with the prayer beads in her hand. The figure seemed to be trapped by something. She looked at Hellion Vivian, full of murderous intent. I'll kill anyone who stops me from taking revenge. I don't want to do it because you're still young, but don't force me. You can't achieve the best revenge by doing this. Hellion Vivian's words were always unexpected. The figure paused for a moment, then laughed eerily. Then how should I take revenge? How should I take revenge? This person took advantage of her young age and pretended to be pitiful to force me. Now that I'm dead, I can finally take revenge. I must let her have a taste of what it means to be in so much pain that she wants to die. I won't let you kill anyone. Hellion Vivian only said this sentence from beginning to end. Because the figure couldn't move, blood flowed out of her eyes. She looked at Tauzi like a lunatic, wanting to catch her. She knew that she didn't have much time. After today, she might not be able to take revenge anymore. Death wouldn't allow her to always be here to bind these Een spirits. Once the time was up, she would be annihilated. She had been hiding for several days, and she couldn't hide anymore. Originally, she wanted to exchange a life for a life. No matter what, she would kill this bitch. Even if she disappeared from this world, she wouldn't regret it. However, Human Shadow did not expect that this bitch would invite such a powerful exorcist. The silhouette knew that Hellion Vivian would not be able to defeat it. Instead, it turned around and flew towards Beligaju. This young man with mysophobia was obviously a young master with a good family background. Moreover, he looked a little thin. Most importantly, he couldn't sense any spiritual energy from him. For such an ordinary person, as long as she possessed his body, the exorcist would not be able to do anything to her. Unfortunately, the figure did not know that the man she had chosen was not ordinary. The reason why he looked so ordinary was because his exclusive soul was by his side. He could carry out the most perfect disguise, covering up all of the original devil chi. When the figure rushed towards Beligaju, Tauzi turned pale with fright. She was afraid that Beligaju would be possessed. Hellion Vivian's eyes narrowed, and her expression changed in an instant. Her short legs kicked hard, and she chased after the figure as fast as she could. Unfortunately, after she became small, her speed was slower, and her legs were shorter. In addition, the figure was closer to Beligaju than she was, so she couldn't catch up with the figure. The figure was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. There were still bloodstains on its face. Anyone who saw it would tremble in fear. However, Beligaju stood calmly in a dark corner, coldly watching the figure approach. When the figure saw Beligaju standing motionless, she secretly laughed. She should have possessed this man from the beginning. She wouldn't have had to spend so much effort. However, when she was about to reach out and clamp the man, she suddenly felt a flash in front of her. That person disappeared before her eyes. It was so fast that it was unbelievable. The figure was stunned and, subconsciously, turned her head. The man who was in front of her a moment ago was now leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looking down at her leisurely. His eyes were full of indifference, and behind him were, yes, countless demons were surging out. You, who are you? The figure suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. How could this be an ordinary person? Which ordinary person would have the ability to make a group of demons obediently obey his orders? The figure still did not feel the devil chi on Beligaju, but she already realized that she had not provoked this inconspicuous man in front of her. There was no time to prepare for her escape. The figure watched as Beligaju did not even raise his hand. He just lifted his eyelids, and in an instant, she felt as if her blood was being torn apart. Ju, stop. Hellion Vivian moved sideways to block him. She looked at Beligaju and said, I'll handle this. Beligaju stopped attacking and chuckled. He reached out and hugged her. There was not the slightest hint of danger in his eyes. His thin lips leaned against Hellion Vivian's ear, and he said in that deep and pleasant voice, What should I do, my master? I can't refuse your requests anymore. Can you not always lean into my ear and talk to me? Hellion Wei Wei's face was flushed red, but she was too small now, so her ability to resist was obviously weaker. She could only let His Highness do whatever he wanted. She tilted her head and said to the figure, It's not worth it to give up your chance of reincarnation for a mistress. I've also done some research on this lady's living situation. Just now, someone sent me a message saying that she's good at using her advantages to snatch men who are older than her. However, these men can't just do as she pleases, just like your family's old Tan. His willpower is so weak that he can be easily seduced. This kind of thing takes 2 hands to clap. You're only looking for the mistress for revenge. How could you forget about your family's old Tan? I can't get close to him. The figure's eyes were red. He found someone to burn my birth characters and asked for a jade Buddha to protect him. I can't do anything to him. Hellion Vivian looked at her. After a while, she smiled and said, This is the attitude of revenge. You won't let anyone go. Tauzi couldn't believe what she had heard. Wasn't that child hired by her to catch ghosts? Why did she encourage an old female ghost to take revenge? Are you kidding me? You were hired by me, not her. Tauzi was angry and scared. She probably knew that Hellion Vivian wouldn't help her. She turned to Beligaju and said, I beg you, brother. I beg you, please save me. She was still crying when she spoke, as if she wanted to arouse Beligaju's pity. Who knew that Bailey Jiaju would laugh? He laughed very coldly. If you let me hear the word brother from your mouth again, I will cut off your tongue. This human's mind was really dirty from head to toe. How could she call him brother? Tauzi was stunned. She didn't expect that her trick would be useless. She was stunned with tears on her face. Chapter 1017. On the other hand, Hellion Wei Wei glanced at Tauzi. Her attitude was still the same as before, neither warm nor cold. I've told you that everything in our shop is fair and honest. The only thing I've accepted your order is to help you catch ghosts. As for what happens to you in the future, it's not part of our service. Then why aren't you doing it? Tauzi clenched her hands and screamed. Hellion Vivian glanced at her with obvious mockery. I'll do it soon, and I'll let you see the whole process. After saying that, Hellion Vivian looked at the figure filled with hatred. The situation now is obvious. You can't beat us. If you make a move, you'll only end up being reduced to ashes. Now, I'll give you 2 options. 1 is to fight. 2, I'll help you take revenge. Listen to my orders now and be converted by me on the spot. Help me take revenge. The figure naturally knew that she was no match for the other party. That man alone could turn her into a pool of blood in an instant. He didn't even do anything just now. Just by relying on his aura, he was able to completely suppress her. Even the death gods in hell didn't give her such a feeling. However, she was unwilling to give up. How can you help me take revenge? Humans are supposed to side with humans, not ghosts. Hellion Vivian nodded and said in an indifferent tone, That's true under normal circumstances. However, your situation is a little special. I've never been particular about good and evil. Of course, it's understandable that you don't believe me. How about this? I'll first tell you how I can help you take revenge. See if you're satisfied with it. I have a record of Miss Towsey sleeping with someone else. It was found by someone else. It was probably the first time Miss Towsey had sex with your old tan. It was accidentally recorded by the hotel's camera. The angle was very clear. In addition to the voice chat records you mentioned, with a little internet search technology, we can push Miss Towsey and old tan out together. We'll let the whole school know what kind of people they are. I can't guarantee what the school will do to them, but don't worry, as long as they did it, I won't give them a chance to make a comeback. Think about it carefully. If you kill someone, not only will you not be able to reincarnate, even if she dies, no one will know what she did. You, on the other hand, have always been treated by the school as someone with mental disorder who came to stir up trouble. In fact, you just didn't handle this kind of thing properly. If a man has a mistress, he will very straightforwardly tell her to get lost. There was nothing to make a fuss about. Just because you didn't make a fuss didn't mean that you didn't do anything. You just had to reveal the truth. No matter what the result was, you just had to be happy in your heart. Don't make a fuss, and don't make a fuss. A woman who was someone else's mistress wasn't worth lowering yourself to see her. She wasn't worthy, and a man who keeps a mistress isn't worth you continuing to be a fool. If there's a next life, you deserve a better man. Annie, do you understand what I'm saying? The figure was stunned. Gradually, tears fell from her crimson eyes. She was not weak, nor was she afraid to get a divorce. However, in this world, she had once wanted to spend the rest of her life with that person. She couldn't bear to. The man who had once taken her hand from her father, led her in front of the priest, and put a ring on her finger, had betrayed her. The man who had held her hand with a nervous expression even when she had pricked it with a thorn. When did it become a habit for him to go home? He couldn't even see her heartache. She had been so good to this girl, but she had slept with her own husband. She couldn't figure it out. She was in so much pain that she couldn't sleep at night. When the girl said to her, "He doesn't have any passion when he's with you. Listen to what he's like when he's with you, and then look at what he's like when he's with you. You're an old woman in your 50s. Who would like you? People would probably think that you're disgusting, fat, and noisy when they stand together. Other than cooking and taking care of people, what else can you do?" Perhaps what she had lost wasn't anything. It was time. The figure lowered her eyes, and the resentment on her body faded away, leaving only endless pain. She was like all mothers of our age, standing there. Perhaps she wasn't very beautiful, but she had a unique gentleness. Perhaps it was like what the girl had said, that she was a little chubby and had wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, but she wasn't disgusting. Helene Vivian took a step forward and put her hand on her hand. It's not that you're not good enough. It's that these scumbags aren't worth the blood on your hands. Thank you. The figure smiled. It was as if all her fatigue had been burned away at this moment. When she reached the end of her life, she realized that her most unbearable past was that after knowing that the person had cheated on her, she still hoped that he would come back. She had never understood. Why did she have to be hurt by so many people when she lost him? Was it because she was old? She remembered what the girl's friend had said about her. It was exactly the same. Was she really old? She didn't understand why these girls would have such thoughts. It was as if it was natural to steal someone else's things. But when she saw Helene Vivian, who was younger than the girl, the figure felt completely relieved. It turned out that many things had nothing to do with age. Some people could grow old together, and some couldn't. Some girls liked to steal from others, and some were still young, beautiful, and self-loving. She didn't do anything wrong, but she had lost too badly in this relationship. She was so embarrassed that she almost lost her life, but others didn't feel anything. Perhaps it was because no one understood. When they heard someone say those words, that was why some feelings would break down. The figure reached out and took the little Helene Vivian into her arms. She used a lot of strength, but she didn't have any intention of hurting Helene Vivian. She just kept saying thank you. Helene Vivian stopped Beligaju from coming over. She put her left hand on the figure's back and said in a low voice, "My mother, she also committed suicide. She was deeply depressed, and it was also because of a man's extramarital affair. At that time, I was still very young and didn't have any ability to save her. So now I want to save you. Don't do things like killing people. Once you start, there will be consequences. The people of Hades won't let you go. Leave the matter of Miss Towsy to me." Towsy, who was named, looked at Hellion Vivian with eyes full of resentment. "So in the end, you took my money, but you want to deal with me. I've never taken money from mistresses. Look at your own Alipay. I've never confirmed a receipt." Hellion Vivian's voice was very light, but the corners of her mouth curved into an evil smile. "But since you found my Taobao shop, I have to give you some user experience." Chapter 10:18. Towsy clenched her fists and said, "What mistress? She's a human and I'm a ghost. Can you use your brain? Also, I hate it when people call me mistress. Just because she met teacher first, does teacher have to spend his entire life with her? You don't have to spend your entire life with her." Hellion Vivian didn't show the slightest anger on her face. "It's just that people like you don't understand what loyalty is in a relationship. No one will jump out and blame you if you steal someone else's. After all, scumbags and bitches usually appear in pairs. However, you shouldn't force someone into a dead end after doing something, not to mention that this person is an elder who cares about you." Towsy sneered. "Even if you're right, what does my life have to do with you?" "Indeed, it has nothing to do with me." Hellion Vivian smiled gently. "Didn't I say that you're my guest? I'll do what I should do, but I'll also do what I promised, Annie. All right, Casso, you've been there for a long time. Come out." As soon as Hellion Vivian's voice fell, a young man in a black suit walked out from the darkness. He was extremely handsome and had a wicked smile on his face. He carried a black scythe that was taller than a person on his shoulder. "Yo, I didn't expect to meet you here." Casso blinked his left eye and blew the stray hair on his forehead. "This place is really hard to find." When the figure saw him, he took a step back in fear. "D Grim Reaper. All right, don't talk nonsense and let me hit you. If I don't kill you, my salary will be deducted by my master, King of Hell." Casso pointed the black scythe in his hand and pointed it directly at the figure. Hellion Wei Wei's figure moved and blocked in front of him. Casso raised his eyebrows. "Phoenix, you can't do this. My legs are hurting from looking for this evil spirit. It wasn't easy for me to find her, but you still won't let me do it. This is against the rules." Hellion Wei Wei looked at him and said, "Your mission is to get rid of her and release the bound spirits here, so that they can be reincarnated according to the normal order. However, even so, the aura of resentment here will not be eliminated. Similar situations will happen again in the future. By then, you will be the one who will be tired. Why don't I help you solve this problem? As long as the evil spirit is released, the aura of resentment here will disappear. Similarly, I have a request." "What request?" When Casso heard that she wanted to release the evil spirit, his whole body shook as if there was a tail behind him. One had to know that resentment had a significant impact on their work. The more resentment there was, the more work they had to do. Those spirits wouldn't be moved no matter what. If Phoenix could help him solve this problem, it would be best. Hellion Vivian looked back at Towsy, and the smile on her face became wider. "Help me find this person's life history. She shouldn't be able to live for long." "Her." Casso tilted his head and looked at Towsy. "She's a greedy person and has a heavy heart. This kind of person will often create many evil things and easily cause resentment. If there aren't any good deeds, I can come back in less than 20 years to cut off her soul." As Casso spoke, he took out a black notebook. "Let me take a closer look. She likes to sleep with old men. There should be a source of infection in her body now. Although she will get married in the future, after she gets married, she will meet a crafty mother-in-law and her marriage life will be very unsatisfactory. Once a woman is infected with this disease, she will have buds all over her body after a month. Her husband couldn't stand it and simply left her with nothing. At that time, she was already in her 40s, more than 10 years older than her peers. Her death was very tragic, and her whole body was emitting a terrible stench. Even her relatives didn't want to go near her. Furthermore, she had 2 abortions when she was young and didn't leave behind a child. This was her entire life in her later years. After Casso finished speaking, he closed the notebook in his hand and smiled faintly. Since there are still men who like this kind of woman, they must be blind. That's why humans are said to have a negative IQ sometimes. I'm also a human. Helly and Vivian glanced at him. And Casso, you were also a human before you died, so don't make racial attacks. Casso shrugged and carried the scythe on his body. I'm not that retarded. I died early. If I died later and found a wife, if she was willing to spend the rest of her life with me and care about my body every day, I would never let her down, let alone be with a young girl. Don't you know? The most beautiful love is the moment I look up and see your head full of white hair. What I remember is the first time I saw you. You were like a young girl. If that day has not come, then there is no need to talk about love. I've received countless souls. Some of them are in front of the hospital bed. Their partners will take out their photos from time to time and look at them after sending them away. They will talk a lot. The older they are, the more they will understand that staying together until old age is more precious than anything else. I didn't know that you death gods can recite poems. Helly and Vivian said lazily. Casso was very proud. Good men all know how to recite poems. Listening to the conversation between Helly and Vivian and Casso, Towsy was about to go crazy. She covered her ears with both hands and shouted, "What do you mean by growing old together? What do you mean by predicting my life? I don't believe it." "It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not." Helly and Vivian looked at her and smiled. "Haven't you always been worried that I won't help you exorcise the ghost? I'll let Auntie reincarnate in peace now. As for you, don't worry. I don't like to kill people, and I don't have the right to decide who lives and who dies. I won't easily change anyone's fate. I'll let Casso out just to tell you that God is watching what people do. No one needs to interfere, and God will take you." Towsy stared at Helly and Vivian. Just like that, she couldn't breathe and fainted from anger. When she woke up again, many school leaders and students were surrounding her. At that time, it was already 6 o'clock in the morning. The laboratory building was like a brand new building. It was no longer humid like before, as if someone had finally let go of something. Even the roses outside the window bloomed into white flowers. From time to time, butterflies flew over. Towsy reached out and touched it. She heaved a sigh of relief. She knew that the old woman was really gone. She couldn't hurt her in the future, even if she wanted to. Chapter 10:19. As for the strange words that the man in black said, she didn't even believe it. Did he really think that she didn't know? Even with the existence of a Hades, the Grim Reaper couldn't casually reveal someone's life. They were just trying to scare her. Towsy laughed in her heart. As usual, she hid the ins and outs of the matter well. Her face revealed a confused and pitiful expression. What happened yesterday? Why am I here? The school leaders and students looked at each other and didn't say anything. Only a female student helped Towsy up and said in a low voice, "Towsy, you need to be mentally prepared." Mentally prepared? Mentally prepared for what? Towsy frowned in confusion. The female student hesitated for a moment. Looking at the gazes of the people looking at them, she said in a low voice, "Everyone knows about you and Professor Tan." Towsy froze when she heard this. Before she could speak, the school leaders had already spoken. "Student Li Tao, right? If you don't have any major problems, we need to talk to you. From today onwards, Professor Zhang will be fired by the school. As for you, due to consideration of the negative impact of the school and the students' quality, we will first expel you from school. The information you posted has already been published on the school's Tieba. Now, the media is also involved in this matter. Many people are waiting for an explanation. Although the death of Professor Tan's lover isn't directly related to you, the indecent photos of you and Professor Tan have a very bad impact on the school's appearance. Therefore, we need to immediately deal with it. You can go home now. We will investigate this matter thoroughly later." "You can't do this," Towsy shouted. "Just because I had sex with a teacher, you want to fire me? On what basis? This is not in accordance with the legal procedures." This was indeed not in accordance with the legal procedures. Therefore, Towsy wasn't taken away that day. She continued to stay at the school. Just because the school didn't deal with it, it didn't mean that no one knew about it. Everyone looked at her differently from before. Many boys liked this kind of girl the most. She was good-looking, usually easy to get along with, and knew how to act coquettishly. When she met a boy she liked, she never hid it. Everyone thought that she was a good person, but in reality, she was more materialistic than anyone else. She had hooked up with Professor Tan. On one hand, she was really infatuated with a man of that age. On the other hand, he would buy her whatever she wanted. Furthermore, he was her professor. It was a win-win situation. In addition, she really didn't like that old woman. Didn't she just know Old Tan earlier than her? Why was she able to live so comfortably with a car and a house? She was so young, but she had nothing? Towsy understood these men very well. When she interacted with them, the more she did not take money seriously, the more they would think that she was special and not a materialistic woman. For example, those women who really didn't care about money were already able to talk about bags, cars, and houses that represented materiality, because in their eyes, there was nothing to be afraid of. However, in the eyes of men, her disguise was charming and different from the rest. Those who didn't disguise themselves would be seen as wastrels. Towsy had used this ability to win over Old Tan. She believed that until now, Old Tan still thought that she truly liked him as a person and only liked him as a person. Towsy was right. After this incident, the man with the surname Tan didn't care about anything else. After finding Towsy, he held her hand and said, "I'll be good to her for the rest of my life." At that time, Towsy already knew that Old Tan had been fired by the school because of this incident. In addition, it had caused a huge commotion. Even in the future, Old Tan's employment would not be too smooth. This was because once such a thing happened to a teacher, it meant that they had no fate with the education industry for the rest of their lives. Old Tan, who was not a professor, was not attracted to Towsy at all. In addition to his sorry state when he came, he had completely become a 50-year-old man who had failed. How could Towsy follow him? She pushed him away. "Are you kidding me? Who wants to spend the rest of their lives with you?" Old Tan seemed to have never expected her to say this. He still refused to give up. "Do you care about how others look at you? Don't worry, I'm already divorced. I can marry you immediately." "Marry me? What are you going to marry me with? The car and house that the school gave you have all been taken away. All you have left is that shabby house. With these shabby things, you still want to marry me?" Towsy was afraid that there would be trouble, so she spoke more bluntly. "To tell you the truth, I can't stand that kind of pain. In order to prevent people from gossiping in the future, it's better for you to appear less in front of me." Old Tan still couldn't believe that this was the considerate girl he knew. He kept asking Towsy if she had any difficulties. Towsy was annoyed by his questions. Seeing that there was no one around, she revealed her true colors. "Do you not understand fucking human language? Do you have to make me fall out with you? You can't even protect yourself now. What ability do you have to give me happiness, old thing?" Hearing the words "old thing," Old Tan felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body stiffened, and he was so angry that he started to tremble. At this moment, a chuckle sounded not far away. "Jew, look, this is what you men are like. At this point, you're still looking for excuses for your mistress. You're really cheap to the bone." Beligaju also laughed. He landed on one knee and lifted Hellion Vivian's small hand with his black-gloved hand. Then, he lowered his eyes and kissed her gently. "My master, you have to understand that not all men are as blind as him." Hey, Hellion Vivian was really not used to His Highness' current actions. Every time, he would treat her like an exquisite doll. After kissing her, he would definitely lift her up and smile beautifully. He was really preparing to raise her like an animal. Hellion Vivian sighed helplessly. Her small appearance looked very cute. However, when her gaze landed on Old Tan, it was more indifferent. "Annie Lynn asked me to bring you a message. She has been childhood sweetheart for more than 10 years and has lived after marriage for 30 years. She has never let you down. She hated you before, but now she doesn't hate you anymore because she won't meet you again in her next life. Even if she does meet you, she will only be a stranger. In the future, whether you are rich or poor, it will no longer have anything to do with her." She will also not enter your Tan family's ancestral grave because you have completely disgusted her. Chapter 10:20. When Old Tan heard the last sentence, his body suddenly trembled. He looked at Helly Vivian and said, "No matter who you are, my relationship with her has long ended. What's there to be disgusting about? If she had agreed to divorce me earlier, things wouldn't have come to this point. I wouldn't have lost my qualifications as a teacher in school. Is that woman unwilling to let me go even if she dies? Now that I don't have anything, she'll be happy. She's really heartless and doesn't know what's good for her." Hellion Vivian sneered and said, "Mr. Tan, aren't you thinking too highly of yourself? Miss Towsey has already said that you're just an old thing. Do you think that other than Annie Lynn, who would really feel sorry for you? You said that Annie Lynn is heartless. If it wasn't for the fact that she wanted you to take the postgraduate entrance exam without any worries, she wouldn't have quit the job she had found and rode a broom car to the road to sell breakfast every day. How do you think you have everything you have now? If it weren't for Annie Lynn, you would just be a poor boy who only knows how to study. Who is the heartless one? Ingrid? You've been childhood sweethearts for more than 10 years and have gone through thick and thin together for 30 weeks. You can't even compare to a mistress who wants to seduce you. You still have the face to mention your job title? What caused you to lose your qualifications as a teacher is your character and this Miss Towsey who interferes in other people's families. Reality is already like this, and you still can't tell who is the one who is good to you. It seems that it's better for Andy Lynn to be dead than to be alive. She doesn't want to waste time by your side. How can there be a scum like you in this world? The education system should really think about who is more suitable to be a teacher. You. Old Tan was like a drowning dog. His hair was tied up, and the demeanor he was usually proud of was all gone. His finger trembled as he pointed at Helly Vivian and said, "Where did you come from? I'm warning you. I see that you're still young, so I won't lower myself to your level. What has our matters got to do with you? You're just eating carrots and worrying. If you have the time, you should take care of yourself. Don't be so talkative and meddle in other people's matters. It's simply ridiculous." Beligaju's eyes darkened. A loud bang was heard. It was unknown where the lightning came from, but it actually split the tree behind Old Tan in half. Old Tan's expression instantly changed. He was scared out of his wits. He pressed his left hand against his chest and patted it with all his might. Towsey was even more terrified when Helly Vivian and the others appeared, because she knew very well that the reason why her matter was exposed was because of the other party's actions. Now, only Towsey would remember what the man in black said to her at the sight of Helly Vivian. How could such a destitute life belong to her? She was so young and beautiful. She could find any man she wanted. As long as she got rid of the burden that was Old Tan, there would be plenty of people who would want her after graduation. However, even Towsey didn't know why, but it seemed that everything was progressing as the shop owner said, including the gifts she promised to give to that old woman. One of them was that she would ruin her and Old Tan's reputation. Inexplicably, Peach's hair began to stand on end again. She looked at Helly Vivian, afraid that the other party would do something. However, Helly Vivian didn't do anything. She only turned her body and stood in front of Beligaju. She looked at Old Tan and said, "You're right. This matter really has nothing to do with me. I only brought the words that Annie Lynn asked me to bring. As for the rest, whatever happens to Mr. Tan in the future will be his own doing. Of course, there's also Miss Tao." As soon as she finished speaking, Helly Vivian glanced in Towsey's direction. Towsey shivered from her gaze and wanted to shake off Old Tan and leave. Now, the way her classmates looked at her was different from before. Although she wasn't expelled from school, she wasn't doing well. Old Tan's appearance wouldn't be of any help to her in the future. Instead, it was like a piece of smelly plaster. She had to shake him off. However, Old Tan couldn't see through Towsey's thoughts. He wanted to hold her back and didn't even look at Helly Vivian and the others. It was as if the words that the people who had accompanied him for most of his life had brought him didn't matter at all. Beligaju's thin lips curled up as he watched this scene. He picked up the somewhat sad little phoenix and whispered, "He will regret it. In a while, he will know how stupid he is. You're not allowed to kill. Helly and Vivian turned around and glanced at him. After turning small, her expression was very rich. Beligaju laughed. Kill such a person? Wei, you look down on us demons too much. From an aesthetic point of view, killing such an old man would only be a disgrace to us. We only kill fresh flesh. This kind of person who emits the lowest level of filth, even Shang Xie, who isn't picky about food, wouldn't take a second look at him, let alone me. Even if we were to eat, we wouldn't eat spoiled food. Helly and Vivian was speechless. Then why did you say that he would regret it? Beligaju's fingers traced Helly and Vivian's hair and touched the tip of her nose. Demons can smell the scent of death. He's about to die. As soon as he finished speaking, a sound came from the other side. It turned out that Tauzi's words had triggered Old Tan. Old Tan's heart disease had relapsed. His fingers grabbed Tauzi and refused to let go. Tauzi simply pushed him onto the stairs with all her might. Old Tan's head was broken and blood flowed all over the ground. He desperately wanted to get the medicine that had rolled to the side. However, the distance was a little far and he couldn't reach it at all. Old Tan looked at Tauzi with bloodshot eyes, hoping that she could help him get the medicine. Who knew that Tauzi would show an unprecedented disgust towards him? She said, "Old thing, it's good that you're dead." Then she ran into the dormitory. Old Tan panted and reached out to grab the clothes in front of his chest. He didn't know why, but he suddenly remembered that when he had his first heart attack, the woman who was afraid that something would happen to him and cooked soup for him. He chased her out of the house. He was so tired that he wished that he could never see that old face again. He even hated that she liked to talk to him when she was eating. He felt that that was a reflection of a person's lack of upbringing. He hated that calloused hand even more. It really made him lose his appetite. However, he had forgotten that without that pair of hands, he would have nothing. He would have even walked into the door of death long ago. No one knew how regretful Old Tan was. He looked at the sky and began to cry. He couldn't breathe at all. Fortunately, someone passed by and helped him call for an ambulance. However, Helly and Vivian saw the ghost servants that emerged from the darkness and followed Old Tan like a shadow. Chapter 1021. You saw them a long time ago. Helly and Vivian asked in a questioning tone, but her tone was very certain. Beligaju smiled faintly as he lifted her up and kissed her. Those reapers didn't dare to approach us because we were here. As long as that man was 10 meters away from us, they would naturally take his life. The reapers who were still walking in front of them all burst into tears. You also know how big of a danger you are to society. Also, we clearly didn't dare to approach because of you. Why did you drag Lord Phoenix into this? Lord Phoenix, I beg you, hurry up and bring this guy home. Perhaps it was because Helly and Vivian really understood the pitiful eyes of the reapers. She did bring His Highness home. However, because she had not recovered yet, she called in advance and was relieved to know that both her sons had gone to school. On the other side of the phone, Monkey asked her why she hadn't gone to the old car dealership for the past 2 days. Helly and Vivian said, "I've been busy with the night business recently." Then, she dismissed him. After all, no matter how bold Monkey was, he would tremble at the thought of his boss doing the ghost-catching business at night. Although she didn't make much money from this mission, she still had something to gain from expiating an evil spirit. The first thing Helly and Vivian did when she returned to the villa was to take out the ruler she had bought to measure her height. After confirming that she had really grown 5 centimeters, she happily took out all the pencils and prepared to lie on the table to copy the scriptures. Beligaju looked at her seriously wearing a kasaya, and the smile on his face never disappeared. As a person who was evil from the beginning to the end, His Highness was naturally not satisfied with Helly and Vivian throwing him aside. Without thinking, he hugged Helly and Vivian, who was still copying the scriptures from behind. His right hand, which was wearing a black glove, lifted Helly and Vivian's left hand that was holding a pencil. He pretended to be deep in thought for a while and said, "Your nails are a little long. It's inconvenient for you to write." Thus, before Helly and Vivian could react, His Highness picked her up and started cutting her nails. When the sun shone through the leaves, speckles of light fell on the side of Beligaju's face. He was always so handsome that it was irresistible. Hellion Vivian only felt that this position was particularly strange. She was being carried around like a child, even though she was clearly starting to grow taller. Just cut my nails. Do you have to hug me like this? Hellion Vivian muttered, her small face blushing. Beligaju was close to her, so he could kiss her ear if he tilted his head. Of course, I have to hold you. Otherwise, what if I cut your finger? Hellion Vivian. That was clearly not the reason. However, when His Highness cut Hellion Vivian's nails, he was indeed very gentle and meticulous. Every movement seemed to have been perfectly measured. She didn't feel the slightest bit of pain. Hellion Vivian originally thought that she would be able to copy the scriptures after cutting her nails. She even very encouragingly tied up her long hair and was prepared to work until nightfall. Who would have thought that Bailey Jiaju would be so competent as to bring over a small set of pajamas? The pajamas were obviously just custom-made according to Hellion Wei Wei's current height. The pure white sleeves were matched with 2 plush ears. It's time for an afternoon nap. My dear master, you should go to sleep. Beligaju picked up Hellion Vivian, intending to personally change her clothes for her. Unfortunately, before Phoenix grew up, she would always wear that kasaya. Bailey Jiaju narrowed his eyes dangerously. Then, he carried Hellion Wei Wei in his arms, as if he had given up. He hugged her and laid her down in the coffin. Since you can't change your clothes, let's just sleep. No, I still have to copy the scriptures. Otherwise, Buddha will think that I'm not sincere enough. After Hellion Vivian returned to being Phoenix, she was still very stubborn in certain aspects, mainly because she desperately wanted to grow taller. Beligaju looked at his empty arms and stood up without thinking. Then, he glanced at the ghosts outside the coffin. Those ghosts seemed to have understood His Highness' intention in minutes and began to stir up trouble. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. Hellion Vivian looked at the suddenly darkening sky and was stunned for a while. Then, she stood up and ran into the coffin to turn on the light. Just as she was about to sit down and seriously copy the scriptures, the electricity stopped and everything was dark. This time, she really had no choice but to drag the pillow and walk to Beligaju. Are you going to take an afternoon nap? It's a bit late for an afternoon nap now, but I can hug you and talk to you. Beligaju smiled calmly. Hellion Wei Wei suspected several times whether or not these things were done by him. But looking at a certain Highness expression, she felt that she was probably thinking too much. In short, the two of them laid down in the black coffin again. Beligaju hugged the person in his arms with satisfaction. The tip of his tall nose rubbed against her jade-like neck. You smell like milk. I'll wash your hair tonight. My beautiful master should smell good from head to toe. Stay away from me. Hellion Vivian's body was still in the growth stage. Being treated like this was always very sensitive. Even her tailbone was a little numb. Beligaju liked to see her like this. He pressed Hellion Vivian's back and then kissed the top of her head. Don't move. Your body can't handle me right now. Hellion Vivian couldn't be more shameless than a certain person. Her face was slightly red, so she let him do whatever he wanted to her. Probably because she was still growing, Hellion Wei Wei fell asleep after a short while. She was snoring in her sleep. Her fair and tender little belly was exposed outside, which was very cute. Beligaju also closed his eyes. With Hellion Vivian in his arms, with his long legs, he didn't look like the great demon that everyone was afraid of. Instead, he was so clean and handsome that people only wanted to look at him more carefully. His eyelashes were very long and thick. His entire body was noble and cold. The ghost wandering outside finally let out a sigh of relief. It had to be known that when His Highness narrowed his eyes, the water and electricity of the entire villa started to be cut off. If Wang Fei continued to copy scriptures and ignore him, the entire city would suffer. Fortunately, Wang Fei obediently slept with His Highness. Otherwise, the ghosts looked at each other and shook their heads with lingering fear. Hellion Vivian slept very well. When she woke up, she could see as certain His Highness' face. She tilted her head and looked for a while. Then she pulled the blanket over and wanted to cover Beligaju, who knew that when she moved, she found that something was different. That's right, it was different. Her hand. Chapter 1022. In. Hellion Vivian felt as if all her rationality had been knocked out of her body along with his movements. Those who had never experienced such a feeling would probably never understand. All of her senses had been sucked away. She could only close her eyes and wrap her arms around his neck as he brought her to the peak step by step, but she didn't know that it was because of this one action of hers. Beligaju suddenly sped up. He pinched her slender, white, and soft waist, half fiercely and half softly coaxing. Wei Wei, listen to me. Don't let go. Let me take you properly. Then be gentler. In the end, Hellion Wei Wei still couldn't resist. She lightly bit her lip and opened her mouth. Her long hair was stained with moisture, just like a flower that had been ravaged when it first bloomed. No matter what, it would only make people want her even more. Beligaju did the same. He carried her and sat down, letting her sit in his arms. As he whispered in her ear that he would be gentler, he fiercely pressed her against him. When he kissed her neck, he didn't forget to tell her how hot and comfortable it was inside. In this aspect, Hellion Vivian was clearly no match for Beligaju. Her arms and legs were red from the rubbing, and a single touch would cause a string of numbness to rise. The lingering lingered for more than 2 hours. Hellion Vivian's body went limp as a certain someone carried her to the bathtub. The things in the villa were the most exquisite, and even the bathroom was very big. It was hard to imagine that one day that high and mighty person would wear a black suit and kneel on the floor with one knee just to wash the person in the bathtub clean. The way he rubbed her waist was so gentle that it was hard for her to refuse. Hellion Vivian was already out of strength, but she wasn't as useless as before. She just needed time to recover. Beligaju looked at her and couldn't help but lower his head, landing a kiss on her trembling eyelashes. Is the temperature of the water okay? Hellion Vivian opened her eyes and saw the way he served her. Beligaju looked like a demon deacon from a manga. Even the smile on his face was so gentle that it was charming. Sure enough, you're still too tired, aren't you? Beligaju pressed his fingers on her waist, looking rather self-reproachful. I'll be gentler next time. Hellion Vivian gritted her teeth. I'll be damned if I believe you. She had begged him just now, but it only aroused his perverted possessiveness. My master. Beligaju grabbed Hellion Vivian's right hand with his gloved left hand and kissed it gently. How can you not trust your loyal dog? Dog? Hellion Vivian blinked. Where? Don't you know? Any demon is the most loyal dog in front of an exclusive soul. When Bailey Jiaju lowered his eyes, his eyelashes would be excessively long, making him look extremely handsome and harmless. So, my master, you can ask me to do anything for you, anything that you like. Hellion Vivian reached out and patted his face. As long as you're happy, it's fine. I like you very much when you're happy, understand? I'm finally showing my domineering side. That's it. I can't lose in terms of momentum. But, can you go away for a while first? I need to put on my clothes. Beligaju heard this and smiled slowly. How can I let my master do this kind of thing? Leave it to me. I'll help you. No. Hellion Vivian still understood him very well and shook her head strongly. I'll put it on myself. Beligaju's fingers paused, and his eyes were bitter. You mean as long as I'm happy? Hellion Vivian. Why do I feel like I've fallen into a wolf's pit again? Don't use the handsome man trick on me. Hellion Vivian refused to accept it. This time, I have to put on my own clothes. And in the future, without my permission, you're not allowed to casually touch me again. If he touched her again, who knew what would happen? There was no other way. A certain someone was too familiar with his own body. She had no way of resisting him at all. After Beligaju heard Hellion Vivian's words, his eyes darkened. For a demon, the orders of an exclusive soul had to be completely carried out. But to make him not touch her again? I'm sorry. My lovely master. How could that kind of thing be done? Beligaju's eyes flickered, and there was another burst of thunder outside. The ghostly shadows immediately sensed something and gathered together, trembling in fear. His Highness is angry. He's definitely angry. Then what do we do? It's already dark now. unlike during the day. We can still block him if he's angry. What can we do? Hurry up and think of a reason. Who else can it be? A bunch of idiots. It must be because of the princess. The ghost guessed right. Beligaju's mood change was indeed because of Hellion Vivian, but it wasn't because he was angry. In the depths of Beligaju's heart, he had thought countless times about the possibility of him trapping her in the Tao of Heaven and taking her for himself. It was nothing more than just like now, when she warned him not to touch her again. But back then, she might have looked at him with disgust and coldness. Although she was indulging him now, Beligaju still didn't like this kind of order. He wanted to touch this person at all times. Since she gave the order, he couldn't disobey. Then he could only use other methods to make her take the initiative to touch him. When Beligaju thought of this, his expression immediately changed, and the corners of his mouth turned into a smile that wasn't a smile. Oh, can't you pretend to be pitiful anymore? Of course, do you think I'll always be fooled? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at him, looking very beautiful. Beligaju tapped his lips with his slender fingers. Then what if I really become your pet dog? What do you mean? Hellion Vivian paused. Why did she feel like she wasn't on the same channel as a certain highness? Beligaju didn't answer her, but stood up and took 2 steps back, his straight legs looking perfect. A black fog was emitted from his body, and there was a bang. The handsome man in the black suit shrunk to look 1 or 2 years younger than Hellion Vivian. It was as if he had returned to the young man from back then, but this time, the young man had 2 silver-white ears on his head, and his whole body was soft and noble, making people want to hug him when they saw him. Hellion Vivian's eyes immediately lit up. When she was still a little monk, when she saw Beligaju, the young man was a little older than this, but at that time, she already thought that if Beligaju had a pair of ears, he would definitely be very, very cute. Not to mention, the current Beligaju was at most 13 years old, and he had a pair of erect ears and a silver tail that swayed back and forth. She really wanted to hug him in her arms. What to do? Chapter 1023. My master, are you satisfied with my current appearance? Bailey Ju chuckled softly. He even adjusted his voice. Although it sounded cold, there was an indescribable sweetness in it. Hellion Vivian couldn't resist this kind of cute thing the most. She suddenly remembered that when she made a contract with Beligaju for the first time, he was still trapped in the ancient book. That was his most demonic soul fragment, and it was very bewitching. At that time, she didn't fall for it, but now, all his soul fragments combined into a whole, and he became like this. Hellion Vivian couldn't resist at all. Beligaju's mouth slightly curved, and he deliberately pricked up his ears. Hellion Vivian couldn't help it this time, and directly hugged him in her arms. She was so beautiful. I'm very satisfied. You can go out with me like this today. Yes, my master. Beligaju increased his strength with a smile on his face, feeling every inch of her warmth, and gently raised his lips. He was very clear about what form to show at what time, but he hadn't been like this for a long time. At that time, he had just been born from chaos. The first thing he learned was disguise. Whether it was humans or demons, when facing cute things, they would always lower their guard. He relied on this natural appearance to lure food closer little by little, and then tore them apart. Except for Sakya and the King of Hell, very few people had seen his appearance at that time. Because this cute appearance only lasted for 40 days, he learned a more perfect disguise. She was elegant and noble, an existence that both the gods and Buddhas feared. Demons naturally knew how to win people's hearts, not to mention the black-bellied Beligaju. But in this world, except for Hellion Vivian, there was no one else who could make this man willing to return to his original appearance. There was no one who didn't like Beligaju in this form. Hellion Vivian hugged a certain highness who was shorter than her, and felt that her heart was about to melt. She didn't care about him not touching her. But this wasn't Beligaju's ultimate goal. He wanted Hellion Vivian to take back that order. But a certain highness had always done things deeply. When dealing with a phoenix who was as vigilant as a fox, he had to give her enough sweetness. Beligaju allowed Hellion Vivian to touch his ears, and he didn't get angry. The tip of his nose rubbed Hellion Vivian's face, a little like trying to please her, but in fact, he just wanted to better take advantage of her. Hellion Vivian didn't notice Beligaju's thoughts, but she still pushed Beligaju away. Her eyes lit up as if she thought of something. Wait! Bailey Jiaju's dark eyes narrowed when he saw the duck that was about to fly away from his mouth. When he raised his head again, there was already a harmless smile on his face. Okay, I have to take a picture of you, Hellion Vivian mumbled as she started to look for her phone. Oh, Bailey Jiaju replied. He raised his eyebrows but didn't say anything. He just smiled. Hellion Vivian turned on the camera function and excitedly started to take a picture of a certain highness's ears. But just as she pressed the button, there was a screech. The phone screen turned black, and the rest of the appliances also rang. Hellion Vivian was dumbfounded. I just bought this phone. It's just a brick. Bailey Jiaju strolled over, his eyes filled with light. What's more, don't you want to enjoy me all to yourself? His voice was very languid, and when the last syllable jumped, it was like a cat scratching gently. Hellion Vivian thought carefully. If she took a picture of Beligaju, it might really cause unnecessary trouble in the future. But she still wanted to take a picture. As if he saw through Hellion Vivian's thoughts, Beligaju's deep eyes lit up. If you want to see it in the future, I'll show it to you. Why leave a picture? Since he already knew that she had no resistance to his appearance, he would naturally make good use of it. That was why his little phoenix was still a little too inexperienced. However, her actions reminded him of something. Perhaps in a while, he could use his phone to take more pictures of her sleeping and then blackmail her. He couldn't be blamed for thinking so much. It was really her order that made him very angry. Hellion Vivian still didn't know what Beligaju was thinking. She reached out and touched his ears again. I want to see it, and you'll change? Without any additional conditions? Of course not. Beligaju knew that she was smart. Even now, she was still wary. He slowly dug a hole for her. Look, I showed you this time. I didn't add any additional conditions, did I? Hellion Vivian stared at his face for a few seconds. I still feel that something is wrong. You really don't have any other purpose? Why do you think so? Beligaju's voice sounded very gloomy, but his ears drooped. Am I not good enough? Hellion Vivian was a little embarrassed by his appearance. Did she really measure the heart of a gentleman with her own mean measure? Cough. Hellion Vivian coughed softly and reached out to hug him. She felt that it was really nice to hug someone softly. She also felt that his ears would sweep across her cheeks from time to time. She hesitated and began to compromise. If you don't like it, I won't take pictures. When ordinary people heard this sentence, they would basically forget about it. But His Highness was never an ordinary person. Demons were best at pretending to be obedient after taking advantage of others. Beligaju rubbed his ears against Hellion Vivian's face. There was an indescribable loneliness in his expression. It's not about taking pictures or not. I just don't understand why you don't believe me. Hellion Vivian was even more ashamed. It's my fault. I just asked casually. I always felt that it was too easy. Like I said, you are my master now. Beligaju raised his head and looked at her with deep eyes. He began to retreat in order to advance. If you want to take pictures for me, I won't stop you. I just want you to trust me more. Hellion Vivian really didn't understand. It was just a simple matter of taking pictures. How could it become such a serious topic of trust? However, seeing that His Highness was so serious, Hellion Vivian didn't dare to be negligent. She immediately expressed her opinion. I absolutely trust you. Beligaju hugged the person in his arms and buried his face in her long hair. His ears trembled as he tried to hold back his laughter. Chapter 1024. Hellion Vivian thought that her actions had hurt His Highness, so she immediately pointed to the heavens and swore, I'll throw this crappy phone aside in a moment and never take photos of you again. Then what if I take a photo for you? Beligaju took the opportunity to ask. The hot-blooded Hellion Vivian instantly said, Okay, as an arms tycoon, this kind of thing was a piece of cake. As long as it could make her other half happy, taking a photo was nothing. Beligaju looked at her and slowly smiled. He pulled her hand and kissed the back of her hand meaningfully. "My master, don't forget what you said." Hellion Vivian blinked. She didn't think it was a big deal, but when she thought about how she had to take His Highness out at night, she felt that she had to take some precautions. "Let's take a look at the Taobao store first. If it's a mistress like yesterday, we won't accept it. If there's a pervert, we won't accept it either. You'll definitely be kidnapped in this state." Hellion Vivian muttered as she opened her MacBook. She didn't forget to let go of Beligaju's hand. If that was the case, it wouldn't be him touching her. It would be her touching him. Beligaju didn't say anything. He wrapped his left hand around her waist from behind and put his face in her neck. The corners of his mouth curled up into a faint, mischievous smile. Hellion Vivian allowed him to use the tip of his nose to sniff her neck. Sometimes, she would avoid it when she couldn't stand it. Most of the time, she let Beligaju do whatever he wanted. The main reason was that she always felt that His Highness's nervous system was more sensitive after he became smaller. As a more mature person, she had to be more meticulous. That's right, she had to be more meticulous. Hellion Vivian looked at the Taobao page that popped up on the screen. To show that she didn't neglect His Highness, she even freed a hand and pressed Beligaju's left hand that was hugging her. Then, she continued to log into her Taobao account. As soon as she logged in, a message popped up. The other party seemed to be very anxious. Hellion Vivian did not reply. The other party had already left 5 messages on the page. Every single one of them had some vague epiphany. Her first message went like this: "Shopkeeper, are you there? I don't know why, but I can't get out of this place. Have I encountered a ghost?" Then there was the second one. "The strangest thing is that I wake up at night and I can't sleep anymore." Hellion Vivian paused for a moment when she saw this. Then, she started moving the mouse and recording. She could tell that the other party was a very well-mannered person. "There's no one here. Even he's on a business trip. I don't know if I'm disturbing your rest at this time, but I don't understand. Why am I here? I've clearly given up and promised to set him free. When he comes back and sees me here, he'll definitely be angry again." Hellion Weiwei looked at this paragraph, and her eyes flashed with some unknown light. Then, she started to type. "Customer, where are you now? I need to know your specific address and contact details before I can help you solve your problem." The other party received a reply and immediately replied, "I'm in Hipingli now. There's an apartment here. I can tell you the room's password. The door is electronically locked. You can enter the password. How about your contact details?" Hellion Vivian seemed to be thinking about something. When she typed these words again, the light in her eyes never went out. The person on the other end seemed to hesitate for a moment, then smiled bitterly and said, "I don't have a cell phone here, but I do have a landline. It's just that the landline called me before, and I picked it up." After that, there was a long silence. I was scared because of this call, thinking that it was a prank call. It wasn't until I saw your Taobao shop that I realized that I might have been pestered by something dirty. Hellion Vivian first typed the word, "No," and then deleted it. Then, she said, "I need to see you in person to know what's going on. If it's not convenient to contact on the phone, you can tell me the room number. When I arrive, I'll give you a hint. Then, you can open the door." Okay. After the two of them finished discussing, Hellion Vivian closed her laptop. Her rule had always been to only accept one order a night. No matter how much the other party offered, she would not accept a second order. This was also the reason why Hellion Vivian's Taobao shop was so popular. Some people said that the shop owner never picked orders based on the price. Instead, it depended on the shop owner's mood. Many people wanted to find out the specific address of this Taobao shop. At the very least, they wanted to search for the shop owner. But the strange thing was that no matter how much money they spent, they could not find out who was behind this Taobao shop. This further established the legend that this Taobao shop was magical. Hellion Vivian's mind was not on this. Instead, she was thinking about the conversation that had just happened. Beligaju chuckled in her ear. "It seems that you are a unique customer." "Yes." Hellion Vivian smiled. "My obsession is very deep. Usually, when a person's obsession is very deep, they will have a lot of merit when they are satisfied. When that time comes, I will be able to reach a higher level." Beligaju raised his eyebrows. "Isn't it good for you to look like this? It won't be good if my son and the rest see this." Helly and Vivian reached out to touch her forehead. Also, Jean and the rest will definitely laugh their heads off. Beligaju curled his thin lips and took her hand away. His voice was slow. Don't worry about those two brats seeing this. They have been sent to America since this morning. Shangxie has an advertisement to shoot over there. He brought Qing Chun and flew over there early in the morning. Helly and Vivian. Then, why did she stay at her room the whole day and not dare to go anywhere? Moreover, he is going back to the demon world tonight. So, he doesn't need to care about those two brats. When Beligaju mentioned Bailey Shangxie, the smile on his face obviously deepened. Helly and Vivian raised her eyebrows. Going to the demon world again? Yes. Beligaju smiled very innocently. In fact, how could he let go of a troublesome son who wanted to go to the company to ambush him? Although it satisfied some of his thoughts at that time, one thing was another. If they provoked him, they would be punished. Helly and Vivian lowered her head and muttered, "Although I feel a little sorry for saying this to my sons, it is really a relief that they are not here at this time. Otherwise, if they see me like this, I will definitely be in trouble." Yes, it is indeed very troublesome. Beligaju sniffed her hair lightly, and his silvery white ears twitched. In fact, Helly and Vivian did not know that except for Beligaju himself, he would never let anyone see her slowly growing up. This was the demon's paranoid possessiveness. Chapter 1025. It was night, and it was drizzling in a celebrity apartment. The apartments within the Third Ring Road were not considered cheap in the capital. However, this apartment was indeed sky-high. Apart from the villa area in the east of the city, this apartment was probably the most expensive. As soon as the car stopped, one could see a successful person entering the apartment with a briefcase. The apartments here were all electronic services. The security index was very high, and there were cameras everywhere. Of course, any camera was just a pile of scrap metal to His Highness. As long as he narrowed his eyes, those cameras seemed to have a life of their own, and they all moved away. Helly and Vivian was worried that someone would see His Highness like this, so she put on a hooded jacket for him. His two silver ears were still standing there, and it was very cute. It didn't look like there were ghosts in the apartment. In fact, this apartment had a very good feng shui location. It was built on the Dragon Vein, and it was oriented east-west. In addition, the summer palace was at the end. There must have been an expert when it was built, so the yin and yang here were very balanced, and it was not easy to cause any resentment. It was a very good apartment. Helly and Vivian was still holding Beligaju's hand. When she walked in, she didn't notice anything unusual. The apartment was very quiet. The floor was made of marble. It was a very high-end apartment, and everything was very clean. Someone was about to get into the elevator, but he turned around and looked at Helly and Vivian and the others, as if he was asking. His Highness still had his head lowered and didn't look up. Helly and Vivian just waved her hand with a smile. That person muttered, "When did these two strange people appear in the apartment?" It was understandable. In the eyes of others, Helly and Vivian's clothes were indeed strange. After all, not many people would go out in a kasaya. Beligaju lowered his eyes and smiled. His fingers were still holding Helly and Vivian. It seems that someone thinks we are dangerous people. Nowadays, there are too many people who judge people by their clothes. Helly and Vivian shrugged indifferently. When she looked at Beligaju, she frowned. You, on the other hand, are wearing a suit and a pair of black gloves. People who don't know better might think you're cosplaying. Why don't you change your clothes? Beligaju looked at Helly and Vivian, and his thin lips fell on her fingertips, soft and cool. Only this kind of clothes is more like your loyal dog. What's more, don't you like the feeling of abstinence? Helly and Vivian glared at him. How did you know? How could I not know what Master is thinking? Beligaju curled his lips and rubbed his ear against her neck again. I even know which part of your body will react when touched. Heh. Helly and Vivian was still not used to being hugged like this in the elevator. Even if His Highness was in a cute state now, it was too embarrassing to be hugged like this in the elevator. Helly and Vivian coughed heavily and pushed His Highness away. All right, we're on the 10th floor. Let's get down to business. Beligaju didn't like being pushed away, especially when that order was still in effect. "Why aren't you walking?" Helly and Vivian turned around in confusion. Beligaju smiled gently. "Nothing." According to their previous conversation, the two of them walked to room 101. Every apartment here was a double floor, and the door was also made of a very high-end material. The metal texture emitted a cold light under the light. Helly and Vivian didn't hesitate and started to enter the password on the electronic lock according to the person earlier. However, just as she pressed 2 numbers, the door was open from the inside. Strangely, it wasn't a woman who opened the door. Instead, it was a very handsome man with a cold side profile. He had messy short hair and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his tall nose. He looked very familiar. Soon, Helly and Vivian remembered where she had seen him before. He was the national doctor who had been very popular recently. Not only did he have a family background, but he also had excellent hardware. He represented the first hospital to participate in a foreign academic conference. After the media released the photo, netizens immediately circled him. After all, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that such a man was a winner in life. There were also many women who wanted to marry him. However, those women more or less gave up after seeing the photo, because there was a beauty standing beside the man. According to industry sources, the two of them were a golden couple. Not only did they specialize in the same field, but they were also fellow students from the same school. They were a perfect match. When Helly and Vivian saw the news, she hadn't seen Beligaju yet. She was playing Plants vs. Zombies with Qingxuan when the photo popped up. She didn't expect to see the real person here. The man seemed to have just taken a shower. Even his short hair was wet. When he narrowed his eyes, he gave people a very unapproachable feeling. He looked at Helly and Vivian and the others with vigilance. Even his voice was cold. "Who are you?" Helly and Vivian laughed and blocked a certain highness. Then, she said, "We are Lanya's friends. She asked us to come here to get something. I wonder if it's convenient for you, Mr. Chun?" The man suddenly trembled and the expression on his face changed. With a hint of mockery, he said, "What does she want? Why didn't she come here herself?" "Probably because she was afraid of disturbing you, Mr. Chun." The corners of Helly and Wei Wei's mouth were still smiling, but at that moment, she looked past the man's figure and her gaze fell on a shadow behind him. That was her guest this time. It wasn't a ghost, but this time, it was a soul trapped in this house, Lanya, who came to find Vivian. Except for Helly and Vivian and Beligaju, no one else could see Lanya at all. At this time, Lanya was looking at the man, her eyes full of unspeakable sadness. The man was still smiling, with a hint of coldness. "If she was afraid of disturbing me, she wouldn't have asked you to come here. Where is she now?" Lanya shook her head at Helly and Vivian. Helly and Vivian immediately understood what Lanya meant. She lied. "She's been in a bad mood recently. One of our male friends accompanied her abroad. Mr. Chun, you're a medical student, so you should know very well that the best way to forget the previous relationship is to find a new one to replace it." The man's fingers paused, and then he laughed. "It's enough to use the same trick once. Why would she use a second time? When did she become so stupid? Since that's the case, please tell her clearly what you want and ask her to come and get it in person." Hearing this, Lanya lowered her head. Her long hair slid over her face and covered all her expressions. But even so, it couldn't hide the sadness emitted from her. Chapter 10:26. Helly and Vivian took a deep look at her, then turned around and chuckled at the man. "Since Lanya asked us to come here, we can't go back empty-handed. Since Mr. Chun doesn't like her at all, why bother to meet her? Mr. Chun, you should be happier if she doesn't show up, right?" The man tightened his grip on the towel and said in a deep voice, "She's smart this time. She found someone who knows how to talk. I really thought that she had let go, but now it seems that she's just retreating in order to advance." Retreating in order to advance? Lanya chuckled. She didn't know if she was laughing at the other party or herself. She was probably laughing at herself. They had known each other for so many years, and she had always wanted to treat him well. Why did she become a repulsive vampire at his eyes? It was as if all the decisions she made were to make things difficult for him, and every step was calculated. But in fact, she had never thought of making him unhappy. Everyone said that the most important thing was not what was done. It was who did it. If it was that person who did this to him, he wouldn't have such a reaction. After all, that person was perfect from the beginning to the end in his heart, unlike her. In his heart, perhaps she was a rude and unreasonable young lady who only knew how to throw money at people. It was time to let go. She had used conditions to exchange for time by his side. It was already very disgusting, not to mention that there was someone else now. When they signed the contract, she promised that as long as there was someone who could move him, she would set him free once the contract expired. Now, the two of them had begun to appear in front of the media together. As the most outstanding doctors, they were a perfect match, and she seemed to be a stumbling block between them. It was no wonder he hated her so much. Lanya reached out and pressed the strands of hair in front of her forehead. As if she had made up her mind, she said something to Hellion Vivian. The man couldn't hear this sentence at all. The people and things in the world of the living were separated from the people and things in the world of the dead. Without a medium to transmit, the people in the world of the living couldn't hear the voice of the soul at all. As a phoenix, Hellion Vivian was naturally different. She looked at Lanya and nodded gently. Then, she retracted her gaze and said to the man, "Mr. Chun, your reaction is all within her expectations." Lanya said that if you're still worried about her pestering you, you could take a look at the cabinet in your study. Both copies of the contract are in there, and both are original copies. You can burn them or destroy them. As for the rest, she has already explained to the Lon family that you broke up peacefully, so you don't have to worry about the relationship between the two families being affected because of your breakup. Even her brother won't ask you to be responsible for her anymore. She's going overseas with her friends. Perhaps she was too foolish to see through the past, but this time, she has thought it through clearly. She even asked me to apologize to you on her behalf when I see you. She said that even though she can't smile and wish you well now, she will be able to let go of everything when she comes back in 3 years. She said that she hopes you can forgive her. Even though she's older than you by a year, she didn't know how to give in to you at all. She was the one who forced you to do what you didn't want to do. However, since both families are longtime friends, it's best if you don't become enemies with her. Back then, she was the one who started it. Although you don't believe me now, she really wants to set you free. She said that she hopes you and Xiao Zichio can grow old together. You're lying to me. When a man heard Hellion Vivian's words, he suddenly laughed and said, "She can't be the one who said those words." Hellion Vivian met the man's gaze and did not avoid it all. "If you don't believe me, Mr. Chun, you can go and take a look at the cabinet in your study to see if the contract is there. The relationship between the two of you should be because of this contract." All right, she said that you were worried that there were some messy photos in her phone, especially photos of the two of you together. Because she liked to take photos with you so much at that time, she didn't like to delete those photos even until the end. She also put the phone in the cabinet. Now that she doesn't have anything that can threaten you, you can go and have a relationship with her at ease. As for the thing that she asked me to take from the beginning, if you really don't want to give it to you, you can burn it. She won't come here again. That's great. The man's voice was very calm. He did not remember how he closed the door. He thought that he would see that infuriating face. He did not expect that everything would be out of his expectations. Is this another new trick? The man sneered and raised his head to take a sip of water, as if that was the only way to suppress the sense of loss that rose from the bottom of his heart. However, an inexplicable uneasiness urged him to quickly walk into the study. He did not care about his injured hand that had just undergone an emergency surgery and took out the things in the wooden cabinet. Everything that Hellion Vivian had mentioned was there. The man's pupils suddenly widened, and his fingers slowly clenched so tightly that it even hurt a little, but he did not let go. Then, he began to make a call. Just like a few days ago, the other party's phone was still turned off. The man seemed to be unable to hold it in anymore. With a bang, the phone in his hand was smashed into pieces. Only half of the screen of the phone was lit up, and it still showed that he was making a call, and the person he was calling was Lanya. At this time, as a spirit, Lanya already knew her situation. She stood at the door of Unit 101 and looked at Helly and Vivian and the others with a bitter smile. No wonder when I picked up the phone, the other party just said hello and hung up. It's not that there's a problem with other people, but that they can't hear my voice at all. The person with the problem is me. I'm already dead, right? Helly and Vivian did not answer Lanya's question. Instead, she chuckled and asked, "You appeared in this apartment from the moment you opened your eyes, and you never left after that?" "Yes." Lanya nodded. Helly and Wei Wei looked around and asked, "Have you ever thought of leaving?" "I thought about it, but I can only walk out of the door at most. I can't go anywhere outside." In order to clarify, Lanya took a tentative step forward, but it was useless. It was as if she was trapped here by something. Helly and Vivian reached out and touched it, and a light flashed in her eyes. "It's obsession. Obsession." Lanya did not understand. Helly and Vivian looked straight at her. "Yes, obsession. If it's convenient, Miss Lan, can you tell me what's going on between you and Mr. Chen?" We were still lovers 3 days ago. When Lanya said this sentence, the curve of her mouth was a little bitter. It's just that other people are willing to be in love, but I negotiated with him. Chapter 1027. Hearing such an answer, Helly and Vivian did not interrupt Lanya, but signaled her to continue with her eyes. Lanya took a deep breath, her fingers were stiff, and her voice was a bit hoarse. "Our families are aristocratic families, and we have known each other since childhood. Originally, I was very close to him. Although I was 1 year older than him, he often took care of me. We grew up in the same courtyard, and we liked to form cliques when we were young. He regarded me as his last buddy, and took me with him wherever he went and talked to me about everything. But I didn't want to be his buddy because I liked him too much. Later, something happened to the Chun family. My family members tried many ways to temporarily save the Chun family. After Uncle Chun was imprisoned, the responsibility of the Chun family fell on him. He seemed to have grown up all of a sudden. He wanted to abandon medicine and go into business. He even wanted to take a leave of absence from school and follow his uncle to do business in Shenzhen. I knew that he made these decisions because he wanted to make a lot of money in a short time. I also knew how happy he was when he talked about the medical profession. So I took all the money to him and told him that as long as he agreed to be my girlfriend, I would give him all the things he wanted. I was probably the most despicable person. I clearly knew his weakness, but I still took the opportunity to get him. He didn't agree at first. Later, I don't know what happened, but after a drink, he had sex with me and signed a contract with me. I would do my best to help him enter the hospital, and he would stay with me for 3 years. Once the 3 years were up, the contract would automatically terminate. I couldn't forget the cold and emotionless eyes he looked at me at that time. Fortunately, he agreed, and I deceived myself and got together with him. Every one of us thought that the Chun family would be doomed this time. Fortunately, my father didn't give up dealing with it. Coupled with the political change, not only did Uncle Chin survive, but he also got a promotion after half a year. He clearly said that he would exchange more money for the contract, but he didn't understand how important the contract was to me. I selfishly thought that since he didn't like anyone, I could have him for 1 more day. So I refused him. He probably hated me for a long time and avoided me when he saw me for a long time. It turned out that what was not yours would never be yours. At the beginning of this year, when he saw Xiao Ziqiu for the first time, I knew that it was time for me to let go. I didn't like myself at that time, and I was afraid that he would go out to eat with Xiao Ziqiu. I was afraid that he would appear on the same page as Xiao Ziqiu. My life was not stable, and I started to lose my temper. I reminded him that the contract was not up yet, and he looked at me as if he was looking at a pile of trash. Maybe this was God's punishment for me, punishing me for having wishful thinking. He will eventually fall in love with someone else. Why did I stop him from pursuing happiness? I clearly wanted to make him happy. Lanya said with tears rolling down her cheeks. After Xiao Ziqiu appeared, I really gave up. I told myself that I should let go, but I don't know why I'm still here. You still like him? Helly and Vivian said affirmatively. She raised her eyes and looked at Lanya. Lanya nodded. Her throat was a little sore. So I still tied him up? If that's the case, you can beat my soul into oblivion. I don't want to continue like this. In his mind, I might be a detestable person, but I can't change that. Ever since I can remember, this person has been by my side. I was afraid that he would leave me one day, so I used such a vicious method. Now, he has someone he likes. I saw the photos of them together. He looked at her very gently. I don't want to hold him back anymore. Miss Lon. Helene Vivian looked at her. What if you're still alive? Lanya paused. I'm still alive? You are a living soul, not a dead soul. Helene Vivian explained in a very professional manner. As an exorcist who has been hired, I have the right to solve the fundamental problem of the guest. As long as I can find your body and solve the reason why you were trapped here, I can send you back. Of course, the time can't be too long. How many days have you been in this situation? Lanya shook her groggy head. I think it's been 4 or 5 days. I don't really remember. You still have 2 days to return to your body. This is commonly known as the first 7 days. If you return before the first 7 days, you will be able to extend your lifespan. Once you exceed the first 7 days, your soul will be infected with the aura of death. At that time, the ghost will appear and take you to the underworld to reincarnate. Now, we still have time. Helene Vivian's voice was very light. Lanya lowered her eyes slightly. If I can come back to life, I will probably go abroad first, like what you said at the beginning, to relax. I probably want to escape. I have known him for too long, so long that I feel heartache whenever I see him. But people are like that. They have to grow up eventually. I will stay abroad for 3 years and forget about him a little every year. When I have completely forgotten about him, I hope to come back and face him and his wife with a smile. I want to give him my blessings. Even if we are not lovers, we have been playmates since we were young. I don't know if he will still hate me as much as he does now, or if he will think that I came with ill intentions. But what I want to do is simply to return to the position of a good friend in my heart. Okay, Helene Vivian smiled. Miss Lon, you're very worthy of my help. Worthy? Lanya always felt that this shop owner's words were very interesting. What surprised her was that the shop owner was only about 15 years old. Shun Jindo might have already thought that she did not matter. Otherwise, he would have noticed this. How could she have a 15-year-old friend by her side? Lanya smiled. The weight on her shoulders seemed to have lightened a little. She felt a stab of pain in her heart, but compared to the first day, it was much lighter. Humans were probably like this. The pain would not be so painful after a while. Helene Wei Wei looked at her expression and her smile deepened. I personally like the feelings of childhood sweethearts, and I also like Miss Lan's character. It's just that Miss Lan doesn't have any idea of the cause of her own death. Don't you think it's strange? Cause of my death. Lanya subconsciously wanted to think of something, but the image was a flash of pain. The pain was so severe that she could not bear it, and held her head. Helene Vivian reached out and grabbed her slender wrist, somewhat worried. Stop thinking now. Do you feel better? Lanya nodded, but her face was still pale. Helene Vivian turned to look at a certain prince who had not said a word since the beginning. What do you think? Chapter 1028. My respected master, you finally remembered my existence. Beligaju's eyes were filled with elegant resentment. His 2 furry silver ears were exposed from the cloak as he moved, making him look like a miniature version of the demon butler in comics. The most important thing is that you don't want to remember. Since she can't remember, why don't I help her remember? Demons were born with the ability to hypnotize people, especially souls that were removed from their bodies. Lanya froze on the spot, and the image in her mind started to become clear. So that's what happened. She drove to find him that day because she wanted to give him something personally and set him free. She didn't expect to hear him say words of hatred to Xiao Ziqiu. Xiao Ziqiu was undoubtedly gentle. She was persuading him to calm down, but it didn't make sense. She had already called him that day and told him that the contract was over, so he could do whatever he wanted. Why did he still hate her so much? After she came out of the hospital, she became muddle-headed. She didn't have time to avoid the truck that was rushing toward her and got into an accident. So that's the reason. Lanya smiled and seemed to be relieved. I'm really too stupid. I still held on to that little obsession until the end, which led to the current situation. Helly and Vivian looked at her and shook her head. No, if that's the only way, it won't trap you. It should be more liberating. Huh? Lanya didn't understand. At this moment, the door of room 101 was suddenly pulled open. It was Chun Jindong, the handsome surgeon. He looked at Helly and Vivian with a deep gaze. Why haven't you left yet? Something happened. Helly and Vivian looked into his eyes and suddenly smiled. Mr. Chun, you've always hated Lanya for so many years, right? But if it weren't for her, you wouldn't have been able to work in your favorite profession. Can't this eliminate your hatred for her? Lanya reached out and grabbed Helly and Vivian. Her fingertips were cold, but it was useless in the end. The voice that poured into her ears was cold, without a trace of warmth. No, if that's the case, why didn't you reject her back then? Helly and Vivian said calmly. Although I haven't known her for a long time, I can more or less tell that although Lanya appears to be very domineering on the surface, in fact, she won't make things difficult for anyone. Even this time, she was the one who first proposed to terminate the contract. She knows that you've met someone you like and stopped pestering you. Mr. Chun, you should be happier. After all, the two of you have been friends for a long time. If you feel that it's awkward to date someone, I'll tell Lanya to avoid meeting you as much as possible. However, I have to say something, Mr. Chun. There's a time limit to a person's love. Mr. Chun, you don't have to think that Lanya will like you forever and try to ruin your relationship with someone. In fact, before the contract had even expired, she had already requested to terminate it. Doesn't that prove that she won't do anything to you anymore? Although she used the wrong way to like you back then, to be honest, she didn't hold you back. Instead, after the two of you got together, she was the one who was treated unfairly. Because of that, she felt inferior when facing you. In the past 3 years, you didn't seem to treat her very well. Since that's the case, Mr. Chun, shouldn't you let go of the hatred in your heart and give each other a happy ending? Otherwise, how can Lanya start afresh? Start afresh? Chun Jindong lowered his eyes, his broken hair blocking his expression. Do you mean that she likes someone else? Helly and Vivian glanced at him and slowly said, It's not that she likes him, but at least she has a good impression of him. Mr. Chun, you should be glad that she really let go this time. You should also know that although Lanya isn't a good person in your heart, she's always so fearless when it comes to relationships. It's indeed difficult for her to forget you now. However, that man is completely different from you, Mr. Chun. He likes Lanya very much. With such a person taking care of her, Lanya should recover soon. Is that why you want to terminate the contract? Chun Jindong laughed and clenched his hands. He looked up at Helly and Vivian and said, Since she doesn't even answer the phone, why does she care whether I hate her or not? Helly and Vivian was very indifferent. Everyone wants to say goodbye to their dishonorable past. Mr. Chun, to Lanya, you're probably that dishonorable past. Are you kidding me? Chun Jindong changed his indifference at the beginning, and his eyes were dyed red. I'm the one who should say that it's dishonorable. Lanya was shocked and slowly lowered her head, as if telling him to stop talking. Helly and Vivian did not stop this time. Instead, she chuckled and said, You're right, but the only difference now is that Lanya doesn't care about your attitude anymore. Since you can't get rid of your hatred for Lanya, then forget it. After all, this kind of thing can't be forced. Let's just treat each other as strangers when we meet in the future. After saying that, Helly and Vivian pretended to leave. Did she say all this? Chun Jindong clenched his fingers one by one. No matter what kind of attitude I have, she doesn't care? Helly and Vivian's expression did not change. Yes. Where is she? Chun Jindong's face was a little pale. Tell me where she is. Even if it's going to end, I want to hear it from her in person. Helly and Vivian chuckled. Why? You don't like her. Hearing the word like, Chun Jindong's back trembled. Helly and Wei Wei's eyes were smiling. Or do you actually like her very much? You just don't want to admit it. Are you worried that you'll lose to her? After all, she has always seemed to be more flexible than you. How is that possible? Lanya wanted to stop Helly and Wei Wei because she knew very well that if she had not proposed to be together that time, he would never have considered to treat her as a lover. They would only be best friends. She was the one who broke that relationship, which led to the two of them falling into such a situation. Of course not. Chun Jindong quickly gave an answer, which seemed to be very cold. I just think that she won't let go so easily. Helian Wei Wei replied with an "oh," and laughed again with a hint of mockery. Mr. Chun, didn't I tell you before? She is no longer the Lanya of the past. Now that she has feelings for someone else, it means that it is easy for her to let go. Then why did she come here? Chen Jindong looked at Helian Vivian. I know very well that she came here before. She didn't go abroad at all. Chapter 1029. Lanya was shocked again, and she looked a little flustered. Helian Vivian asked calmly, if she really came, why didn't you see her? Chen Jindong was suddenly speechless, because even he did not know why he could not see her when he clearly felt that she had been here. Actually, Mr. Chun, why are you wasting your time on Lanya? Helian Vivian saw that he was deep in thought, so she chuckled and continued. I heard from Lanya and read the news. You should be ready to pursue someone else. Since that's the case, why don't you two break up peacefully? Chen Jindong did not speak again. In fact, Lanya knew very well what he was thinking. He was probably still worried. After all, she only asked him if he wanted to break up with her. He drove her out of the house. It was raining that day, and it was extremely cold when the water droplets fell on her body. She did not cry. The next day, she had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius, and she was alone in the hospital with a blanket. Through the window, she could still see him and her walking together in their white coats. Thinking about it carefully, it was from then on that she seriously considered breaking up with him. Who knew that after she recovered and calmed down and wanted to have a good talk with him, she would get into a car accident because she could not accept that scene. He was probably worried that she would ruin his relationship with Xiao Ziqiu. After all, she had used tricks to get him back then. In his mind, she had long become a person who would destroy other people's relationships for her own sake. In fact, he did not understand. Her pride might be lowered because of love, but she would not destroy anyone's relationship. She had said from the beginning that if he met someone he liked, she would set him free. He did not even give her that little bit of credibility. It was obvious how sad her life was for the past 3 years. Lanya did not know why she was crying. Perhaps it was because the grievances had accumulated to a certain extent. She could not bear it anymore. For 3 years, she threw away her self-esteem in exchange for time with him, because she was too afraid of losing him. She thought that she would get something, even a little bit of gratitude. However, in the end, all she got was disgust and her love that was about to run out. No one knew how she felt when she was curled up in the hospital that day, watching the penicillin in the bottle flow into her blood vessels. She was in great pain. It was as if her internal organs had been hollowed out. She thought that if she could choose again, she would not say that she liked him. She would distance herself from him the moment she realized her feelings. However, in this world, there was no such thing as a medicine for regret. Lanya was somewhat glad that the heavens had let her get into this accident. If it wasn't for this car accident, she might not have known how insignificant she was in his heart. He had never been a person who liked to take photos. However, there was a group photo in the book. There were many people in the group photo. Xiao Ziqiu was one of them, but his position was quite far away. At that time, the Chen family was still safe. Even when they were graduating, he still had to put his arm around his shoulder to show the intimacy between them. Should he say that he was stupid? At that time, she didn't realize that maybe he already had someone he liked. He was the most evil person. If it wasn't for that contract, perhaps they would have been together long ago. In the beginning, she was indeed jealous of Xiao Ziqiu. That woman had everything that she didn't have. For example, she was gentle, considerate, and coquettish. Moreover, she was younger than Chen Jindong. Most importantly, when Chen Jindong faced Xiao Ziqiu, even his eyebrows were curved into crescents. That gentleness was completely different from when he was with her. Come to think of it, even when he was with her, he was unusually passionate. She didn't even dare to make him angry, because this relationship was destined to be unequal from the beginning. If it was Xiao Ziqiu, he would have been more patient. After seeing the photo, she figured it out. She wanted to repay him, no matter what. However, at that time, she found that she couldn't leave the house. At first, she wanted to call her elder brother, but for some reason, she found that the phone in the house could only be picked up but not called. She had no choice but to contact her family through the internet, but it was still to no avail. Only when she visited a Taobao shop and saw the owner did she realize that she had become a soul. The most ridiculous thing was that she was in such a state and couldn't leave because of her obsession. "I regret it." Lanya, who had never been willing to say these 4 words, suddenly smiled. Tears slid down her cheeks. Helly and Vivian glanced at Lanya behind her, turned around, and looked at Chun Jindong. "Mr. Chun, have you ever thought that Lanya would regret it one day?" Chun Jindong's eyes widened. "Regret? That's right." Helly and Wei Wei's eyes were clear as she continued. "I personally told her that she regretted being with you back then. If she could choose again, she would still give you all her savings, but she would go abroad at that time and only do what a friend should do. She wouldn't put all her attention on you and would only be your childhood friend. That way, when you meet again, you will have someone you like and she will have someone she likes. Just like when the two of you were together when you were young. She said that she was older than you to begin with. So, in the beginning, she only wanted to take care of you. You were probably younger than her when you were the youngest. Every time you went to school, when the seniors wanted to bully you, she would stand in front of you. In fact, this kind of feeling has never changed, no matter whether it was after she grew up or when she was young. You don't have to think of her as a completely different person. This time, she has really retreated to the position that she should have retreated to. If you have the chance to meet again in the future, she will treat you as the younger brother from the very beginning. Whether you believe it or not is no longer important to her." Hearing this, Chun Jindong suddenly put his hand on the wall beside him. In the past 3 years, they had quarreled countless times. When he was unhappy, he would feel unbearable when he saw her standing there. Yes, he knew very well that if they didn't grow up together, she wouldn't have tolerated him so much. He knew that person the best. She would often confuse her feelings. To be honest, she didn't like being close to him at all. If she really liked him, how could she not like being close to him? However, it didn't matter. Anyway, he didn't like girls like her. They could have been together for a long time and treated each other as family. He thought that she would stand by his side and comfort him when he was at his lowest. The ridiculous thing was that she did give him what he wanted most, but in that way. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.